right, let's testify, man.
Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it out. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing that. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
And good morning, everybody. I hope that you are doing well, or at least as well as you could be, given whatever is going on in your life. Hope you're, especially if you're in Minneapolis. Oh my goodness, that's just never going to end. I apologize for being late. I actually do have an excuse, and so I'm going to share with you a picture that I just took from this window. So if you're one of those geniuses that can figure out the exact location of anything from a picture, this is your big opportunity, I guess, to pinpoint my house. So I'm about to show you basically the front yard of our house as viewed from that window, the one with the black curtain behind me. And let me share. Here we go. And now it might be hard for you to see, but right there in the center of the picture is a rather large tree branch. In fact, that the base of that tree branch is about this big around. If that had hit our car, the car would probably be totaled. Fortunately, it didn't hit anybody or anything of value. It just landed right smack dab in the middle of the yard. It is completely, it's hard to tell from this particular picture, but it is completely coated in ice because we had people are freaking out, but it really is kind of a minor ice storm that blew through here. So it's we got, in fact, the grass that you can see through the ice sheet, because that's not snow. Just to make this clear, there was snow, but the snow's all gone because it rained. It rained enough to basically where the rainwater washed away the snow, but then it became freezing rain, and so what you see there is actually a thin layer of ice that's covering pretty much everything. It's the ice is maybe about a half an inch thick at its best, which of course is a lot of ice. So, but I've been through far worse. Let's see. So the wife sent me. Oh, that's part of. My wife and I were talking about the second Minneapolis shooting. We were talking about that just before going live today. So she sent me some stuff on it. But at any rate, so yeah, that thank goodness that tree did not hit anyone or anything of particular value. It just landed in the yard, so it's going to be a big old mess for me and Joshua to try to clean up after the storm goes away. The you know, it is what it is. It's just one of those things. So we're gonna have to chop it up. Basically, we do have a small fire pit in the backyard. So and this happened once before. So all we got to do is basically cut it into pieces small enough to carry, and then put the said pieces into the fire pit. And once the wood's dried out enough, pour some charcoal fluid on it, and have a nice big fire. But first thing is, gotta chop it up. Now it's gonna take some time because I only have a little battery powered chainsaw. I don't have anything of any significance. So cutting it will definitely take some time. At any rate, so that's what's going on here at Casa de Crawford. Other than that, I don't have a particular topic. I was hoping you guys would actually ask some questions today. It's kind of funny. I had an Uber ride yesterday, I think. Days blend together. It was either yesterday or the day before. But this guy, really nice guy, and picked him up. He was a substitute teacher at a local school. And we got onto the subject of various myths surrounding Christianity and stuff. He's an atheist, but like I said, he was not a jerk or anything like that. He wasn't one of those atheists that when you talk to them, you just feel like rolling your eyes back. He was a reasonable, intelligent person, not a person that's just looking to, put someone down because their beliefs are different. But anyway, we were talking about some stuff, and the thing I really liked was that he asked genuine questions. And so, for example, when we were talking, I mentioned, the myth that many Christians believe in is that the Bible makes it clear that the earth is only 6,000 years old, or roughly in that neighborhood, and of course that the world was created in 6 literal days. And rather than like the typical atheist reaction when we talk about this would be either to suggest that I'm not a real Christian because I don't believe that, because that's a typical tactic to try and make it so that you start questioning your own faith or whatever, or to roll his eyes at the silly beliefs of Christians. But no, his he looked all seriousness. He thought about it for a second. He said, well, where do you think that this belief came from? And so we talked about it a little bit. Really, the idea of young Earth creationism, as we now know it, did not get started until like I think it was like the mid 19th century. It was basically a Protestant movement, and the idea was that if you simply add up the ages of the patriarchs until you get to a known date, then you should be able to calculate the age of the earth by saying the combined ages of everyone from Adam until you can get to, let's say, you get to Christ, right? So Christ was born somewhere in the neighborhood of, between the year 10 BC and 0. Somewhere in that neighborhood is where Christ was most likely born. And so you can at least get within a window of about 10 years, and then you can just go back from there and say, well, if Adam, let's say, so we'll just use round numbers. Let's say Christ was born 2,000 years ago, and Adam was born 4,000 years before Christ. That would mean that the earth is 6,000 years old, right? So, because, of course, we know the earth was created exactly 6 days before Adam's birth. And that has a lot of problems, not the least of which is that, okay, but it doesn't say that Adam was born 6 days after the earth was formed. And in fact, what's kind of interesting is that it doesn't say specifically when Adam was created at all. Because a lot of people think, oh, Adam was created on day 6, right? That's what it says. But it doesn't say that. What it says is that on day 6 of the initial creation story, it says God created man, and then he said, man, male and female, he created them, meaning humanity. It doesn't say anything about Adam or the garden or any of that, right? That comes in the next chapter. And the next chapter is a totally different story than what we get in the first chapter. The first chapter is the story of the creation of the universe. The second chapter is the story of God's relationship with a specific person, namely Adam. And so even if I want to go with the presupposition that, even though I don't necessarily agree with this, but the common presupposition is that every book of the Bible is just straight up history, right? Okay, fine. You want to say that everything that's depicted in the Bible is straight up history, which means that you have to assume that every event and every person described in the Bible actually existed, and every event actually happened. Fine. Even taking that into account, there is absolutely nothing that makes it clear exactly when Adam was created. While Adam was created by God as opposed to being born from a mother, he the date is unknown. What we do know is that Adam was definitely not the first human being, and Adam and Eve were definitely not the only human beings on Earth during that time. Because after Adam and Eve have their second child, Cain, Cain then decides to murder his brother Abel, and as his punishment, Cain is banished by God himself, and Cain then goes off to the land of Nod, and that's where he takes a wife and there's a city there and all this stuff, and that's about all we know about Cain. At that point, the narrative about Cain pretty much ends after he takes a wife. But what's interesting about all that is how could he have gone? Not, I mean, like some people say, well, his wife was obviously his sister because Adam and Eve were the only two people, except that there's no account of Adam and Eve's having other children before this time, and even if they did, like if Eve was just pumping out a baby every 9 months, well, give her a little bit of time to heal from each one, say every 11 months or at least every year, that from the time of creation to the time of her death, every year Eve was just pumping out another baby, right? Even if that were the case, there wouldn't be enough people on Earth at the time that Cain went to Nod to have a city there, which is what the Bible describes in Genesis 1. And I'm sorry, not Genesis 1, but I believe it's in like chapter 3. Let's go there. Let me bring up my handy dandy online Bible. We'll go to Genesis. Here we go. Cain and Abel's actually chapter 4. Um, and let's see. Here we go. Let me switch to the other screen here so you guys know I'm not. Whenever, and for those of you, if there's anybody here that's not a regular, whenever I start talking about stuff that's in the Bible, I usually try to bring up the actual biblical verses so that you can see that I'm not lying. However, I also am one of those people that says, do not take my word for it. Look it up yourself. If you got a Bible, you can verify anything and everything I say as far as what's in the Bible. But this is Genesis chapter 4. And so we have basically, says, let's see, Adam made love to his wife Eve. I like the way it's phrased in the NIV. I believe that, like, well, let's take a look. I think the King James has some poetic language there. Let's see. King James. Where is the King James? New King James. Man, I am just having all sorts of trouble finding things today. King James. All right. So, yeah, and Adam knew his wife, and she conceived. That's the King James version. I get that it's very poetic and all that, but I have to say, yeah, I know my wife, right? And so I don't need it's not a sudden discovery of who she is anytime we have any kind of sexual relations. So I don't particularly understand the new that he knew someone is as a description of that particular thing, and that's why I'm looking it up. So it's the word is yada. Hey baby, I want a yada. But it's a yada to know, recognize, understand, or to have sexual relations, to be respected, to be known, make oneself known, to cause to know, to be well known, to show, to teach, to make known, be aware. So it looks like the word yada. So when you say, oh man, so I'm gonna have to tell my wife, I'd like to get to know you, yada yada yada, because that's 3 times. Anyway, so yeah, the word yada does in fact mean to know someone. So I guess the King James you could argue is more accurate, assuming that the reason that we in and I don't know because and man, I need to get a Greek, or not a Greek but a Hebrew lexicon. Some they're so expensive, but I'd like to be able to look up. The problem is the word yada. Does it actually mean to know someone, or does it say that because that's what the King James translated it as? because it does seem a little odd that the word for sex is also the word for knowledge, because because most of the words translate to something in modern English, and I've never heard anyone phrase, it's not like I say, oh, I had sex with him, as a way to say that I knew him. That doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. I'm having a little bit of trouble with that. But at any rate, getting back to what we were actually talking about. So Cain and Abel. Okay, so Adam made love to his wife Eve. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. So this is the beginning of the Cain and Abel story right here. Is that okay? So Adam made love to his wife. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. Okay. With the help of the Lord, I brought forth a man. Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. So Cain was actually the firstborn child of Adam and Eve. In case you care. Now, Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. So Abel was a shepherd, Cain was a gardener, right? Or you could say a farmer. You could say a farmer versus a rancher, right? So Abel was the rancher, Cain was the farmer. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions of some of the firstborn of his flock. Now, listen right there. So Abel brings the fat portions, which we already, if you've been with us on the live streams during the week, during most of the sacrifices, God really regards the fatty portions as that's the best stuff for a sacrifice. So Abel actually brings what God likes best: the fatty portions and the fatty portions of the firstborn of his flock. So he's not waiting around to get enough sheep going first and then bringing a sacrifice. He's taking the firstborn and taking a sacrifice from that for God. So that's a bit different. But meanwhile, Cain, it just says he brought some of the fruits of the soil. It doesn't say he brought the first fruits, which is a common phraseology in Christianity. Is the first fruits is what you give to God. The first thing you do is give to God. Then you can give to yourself. But God wants to be thought of before you think of anything else as far as the production of your labor. But Cain didn't do this. He just brought random fruits, while Abel specifically brought fatty portions of the firstborn in his flock. And why is that important? Because of God's reaction to their offerings here. All right, so the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. So say look upon with favor is a nice way of saying that God liked that, right? So he liked Abel's offering of the fatty portions of his firstborn. But on Cain and his offering, he did not look with favor. So didn't care so much about that one. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So God didn't particularly like Cain's offering, and Cain was butthurt. That's what it's saying here. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Now, notice he's not saying here that Cain sinned. It doesn't say that Cain did anything bad by making this particular offering to God, only that it's not as good as the offering that his brother made. His brother took from the firstborn, Cain just took some fruits. But it makes it clear that this is not sin, but when you get when he said, when you do not do what is right, so he didn't give the firstborn, right? So he didn't do what he should have done. sin is crouching at your door. So basically, that you're right there, buddy. You need to be very, very, very careful. And desires to have you, you must rule over it. So when you have that desire for something that is sinful, you need to let your intellect take over and not do it. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out into the field." While they were out in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. The first crime in human history, or at least the first recorded crime. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" If you've ever heard that expression, we say, "I'm not my brother's keeper," or something. Yes, yes, indeed you are. And then the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." A very poetic way of saying, you ain't going to live here because you basically tainted this area with murder. You know, when you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be restless. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Now, some people thought that this means that Cain is still wandering the world to this day. There's nothing that says that. It's just a nice myth. But yeah, there's nothing there about that. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whomever finds me will kill me." Now, notice, this is kind of important. How could anyone find him as he's wandering the earth if there's only four people on the planet, right? Adam and Eve, well, three now, but Adam, Eve, and Cain are the only people in existence according to the hyper literalist fundamentalist Christians out there, right? So, if that is true, if Adam, Eve, and Cain are the only three people on earth, who's going to find him? Who is Cain worried about that's going to kill him? Cain is the third oldest human on the planet, and there's only three of them. So that's right there. It's like that's one of the reasons I do. There are other people out there, and this is why I don't think there's even a problem between taking the Bible literally and science, because people say, well, we all know humans evolved from primates. We had some ape-like common ancestor with the other great apes. Blah 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 blah. Blah, right? That's all fine and dandy. These guys were created separate from all that, right? So I don't have a problem. You could say that evolution took place, and all the people of the world have spawned from natural evolutionary processes. But in the meantime, God created a guy named Adam to be his personal gardener, and then he made a wife for her named Eve. There's nothing about those two things that are inherently conflicting unless we want to make it that way. And the way we make it that way is to insert ideas like, well, Adam and Eve were the only two people on earth, and therefore everybody is descended from Adam and Eve directly. And that means that, well, basically that means that science and scripture are now directly in conflict. And I like a lot, like what Thomas Aquinas said about that, is that if what you read in scripture and what you see in the world are two different things, then you are misinterpreting one of those two things. Either the science is wrong or scripture is wrong. However, and Thomas Aquinas and Augustine and others said, don't always assume it's science that's wrong. It's not that the scripture is wrong; it's that your interpretation of that scripture is wrong. Right? So it's entirely plausible that, especially, and by the way, I'm trying to think. I think it was John Lennox was saying that if if you let's say you read scripture to mean that Adam and Eve were the first two people and the only two people on earth at that time, and Cain and Abel were their first children, which means yes, when Cain murdered Abel, he reduced the population of earth by 25%, right? That's that is a way to interpret all this. But then when you look around at the world and you realize some of that doesn't quite jibe with reality, then you have to ask the question, what am I assuming in this narrative that it's not saying that I believe it is, that's somehow conflicting with what I observe when I look at the world? And one of those things is that Adam and Eve were the only two people on earth. Doesn't actually say that. It doesn't actually say that Cain was, when Cain killed his brother, that was actually the first murder that ever took place. It only says that he killed his brother Abel. So we got to be careful not to create a narrative that's not there. We have to be careful, basically, not to put words in God's mouth. So that's a very dangerous thing to do. And don't get me wrong, I don't think this is a salvation issue. Like, I don't think anybody's going to hell because they believe that Adam and Eve were the only two people on earth. And by the way, if Adam and Eve were the only two people on earth, I don't think anybody's going to hell for believing that they weren't the only two people on earth, because this is not a salvation issue. But what I think is important to think about, and I do think this is very important to consider, is that when we as Christians spout things that are obviously and patently false, and we insist it's true because the Bible says it, right? That pushes people away from Christianity. Because if you could be a well-meaning, nice, rational, wonderful atheist, and when you start hearing people spouting off about like you listen to Kent Hovind and stuff, where they start talking about how basically dinosaurs and man walked the earth together, and that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and Noah put two of every species of animal on the planet in his ark, even though there's no way that you could make an ark big enough for that, especially from the materials available to him at the time. You start getting into all these things, and what do people do? A rational atheist is going to look at all this and say, well, obviously Christianity is false because they believe that Adam and Eve rode dinosaurs to Sunday school. And that's just silly. It clearly didn't happen. And so they walk away. They're not interested in what you have to say because you started out with something that they know is untrue. Now, let's suppose for just a minute that all of that, the thing that the fundamentalists say about Adam and Eve riding dinosaurs to Sunday school is actually 100% correct, and that the world was created approximately 6,000 years ago, and that dinosaurs being millions of years old, that's all just a myth. It was actually dinosaurs existed at the same time as man. And, who knows? Maybe Adam like brontosaurus burgers, just like in the Flintstones. But all the dinosaurs died off in the flood. Okay, so let's assume that's completely true for a minute. The beauty of science is that science is always evolving and always correcting itself, right? And so, I think this is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm certainly, I'm not saying, well, things in science aren't true because it's always changing. I'm not saying that, because I think that scientific knowledge is a quest to get to the fundamental truths of the universe. That and eventually, given the scientific method and given open-minded, rational scientists using the scientific method for their theorems, sooner or later the truth will come out, right? If the earth is only 6,000 years old, if Adam and Eve were the only two people 6,000 years ago and everybody else is a direct descendant of them and all that, if all that is true, then eventually the scientific data will back it up. But for right now, I'm not going to push that issue on someone because it might push them away from Christ. And to me, it's more important that someone comes to Jesus than it is than whether or not Adam and Eve rode some dinosaurs to Sunday school. Right? It's more important that that the truth of the gospel message gets out there than any of those side issues. I don't care if you believe the earth is flat. I don't care if you believe that dinosaurs roamed the earth 6,000 years ago. I really, all that is a side issue. It's worthy of discussion, sure. But as far as when you're trying to talk to the atheist, be very careful about what the Bible actually says versus what you think it means. Okay. All right. So yeah. So he was worried that he was going to be killed by whoever finds him. Right. So the Lord answered him, right? And the Lord said to him, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. Again, this strongly implies that there are people on the earth that are not related to Adam and Eve. Because if, in fact, Adam and Eve and Cain were the only 3 people on the planet at that time, why would God need to mark Cain so that people would know that God would take vengeance on them if they killed this man? Because all God would have to do is go, "Hey, Adam, don't kill him." Right? And by the way, what are the odds that Adam is going to kill his own son? Probably not very high. Even if he found out about Abel, he probably wouldn't kill his son for killing his other son, right? So but if let's say that he goes to some other city and word gets out that he's a murderer, then people are going to come after him, right? But get this. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence, and he lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So he went to Nod, which is east of Eden, where Cain made love to his wife. Well, where did his wife come from? There's no mention of Adam and Eve giving birth to any girls prior to this. And let's be real. I mean, while we don't know exactly how old Cain and Abel were when Cain killed his brother, but I'm pretty sure that his wife was not an infant. And so, yeah, especially since she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. So, if Cain made love to his wife and she got pregnant and gave birth to Enoch, that means she has to be at least 13, 14 years old, minimum. All right. I'm not saying that that's any, when people should get married, but, back then, yeah. But if Eve had had a child 13 years prior to Cain and Abel going out into the field and the first murder, you'd think there would be something about it because it does talk about the other children that Adam has. And while it doesn't name Adam's daughters, it does say they existed, but not yet. It seems at this point in history, Adam, Eve, Adam and Eve only had 2 children, and those 2 children were Cain and Abel. But then Cain gets married in the land of Nod. right? And then so he gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. So Enoch was born Arad, and Arad was Enoch was born Arad. I'm not sure. That's weird. Let me bring up a different translation and see what it says. If we bring up, let's go to the New King James. Why not? So we go back to 18. All right. To Enoch was born Arad. So that makes a little bit more sense. Let me go back. Maybe I misread. CNIV. Oh yeah, I did misread. Okay, so to Enoch, man, dyslexia sucks. Oh no, I'm still in the yeah. This is the NIV, so I'll make sure. So it was two. The word two becomes very important there. So to Enoch was born Arad, and Arad was the father of however you say that one, Mechuzul. And Mechuzul was the father of Methuselah, and Methuselah was the father of Lamech. Lamech married two women, which, so he, blah, blah, blah. And so, but then right here, Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to his son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, and his name was Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. So what's interesting here, and this is where we get into something that I've talked about before: chronological versus logical. If you're doing a strictly chronological storytelling, I'm pretty sure that Seth was born before he had his, what would it be? Enoch was born. So we have grandfather, great grandfather, great great grandfather, great 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 grandfather. Let's see, great 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 grandfather. Let's see. So, great 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 grandfather. So, was Adam a great 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 grandfather before his wife got pregnant a fourth or a third time? Probably not. I would say that Seth was born before all that. But the reason that it's done in this particular, and you'll see this in multiple places in the Old Testament, is that it will first tell you, okay, so Cain, here's everything that happened to Cain, right? And now Cain's story is done. After this chapter, we're not going to talk about Cain ever again. Instead, now we're going to talk about Seth. Right, and that's what happens after this. We follow the line of Seth. Seth's line eventually led to Abraham and all that good stuff. All right, but that's just a very, so that's a very, very, very long-winded way of saying that we need to be very careful as Christians about trying to say what's in the Bible versus what we think is in the Bible. We need to be sure. As Mike Winger, he's a theologian here on YouTube. He likes to say you need to think biblically about everything, and the way that you think biblically is you go to the Bible as your source, not your memory of it. You don't just wing it. You got to go there and verify it. Because if you say something that ain't there, you're teaching people bad doctrine. And Jesus warns very harshly about teaching people bad doctrine. It's not a good place to be. Trust me. All right. So, well, don't trust me. Read it. It does say it. All right. I do want to check. So, Street Preacher put a link to something. So, let me see what that is. I'm sure it's vitally important. Let's see. Yeah, I know all about Skeletor. Thank you very much. Um, All right, let's go to there. All right. I think that looks like that's the only link there. Oh, that's a link to our Starfleet Academy talk. Okay. Well, thank you for putting that in there. All right, let me go to back to the beginning of the chat, and we'll see what you guys have to say now that I've been ranting for the last 40 minutes. So Bradley first in the house, as always. Good to see you, Bradley. You know, Thomas Potts used to always be first in the house, but you know, Thomas, I'm beginning to doubt you, buddy. Multi Gunman says, "How's it going?" I am doing okay. I'll just say that. You're early today. You are not early. I was late. And I already explained the reason I was late is because the tree that fell in our front yard, fortunately, didn't hurt anybody or do any major property damage. But yeah. Josiah says it snowed a little bit at my house. Yeah, we got, gosh, probably about 3 or 4 inches of snow before the ice hit. Which, yeah, I'm not going to go out. I really should, but I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to go driving today, but I'll try to go driving tomorrow if the road's clear enough. Let's see. Wood for fireplace or outdoor fire pit. Yeah, I wish we had a wood burning fireplace. Unfortunately, we have a gas fireplace, and gas fireplaces are fine and dandy, but I prefer wood. And yeah, that would be a nice hunk of firewood if that were the case. If we had a wood burning fireplace, I'd definitely cut those into small pieces for doing that. Yeah. Trustin in the house. Good to see you, buddy. Says good day. Multi Gunman says, I hate ice. It's the worst thing about winter. I'm not a fan of ice storms, I ain't gonna lie. But I don't particularly hate ice. Let's see. Josiah then says, I'm from Texas. We are not used to snow here. Well, Texas actually got that ice storm a few years ago that killed some people. So, yeah. Signed book collector in the house says, sorry I'm late. That's okay. You will be forgiven, but only this once. Are you and your family staying safe in this mess? So far, yeah. We're not. We before the storm hit, we made sure that we had enough canned foods and stuff in case we lose power. Fortunately, though, we've been lucky, and the power has not gone out. So thank goodness for that. Although if the live stream suddenly ends, it's probably because the power went out. But we have plenty of canned food if the power does go out to last us at least a few days. And we use those little 5 gallon water dispensers. We have 2 of them in the house, and we keep about probably about 8 or 9 bottles of water that we keep filled, and so that's plenty of water to get through at least a couple of weeks if we needed to. So all in all, we're staying safe because I ain't going anywhere. I'm not, even though like I said, I really should because I'm behind on the bills, but I'm not driving anywhere until it's safe to do so because as important as the bills are, they're not more important than being alive. Gregory House versus Adrian Monk. House versus Monk. Huh. Now that, well, here's the problem. Neither of them are really fighters of any kind, right? House is, of course, a doctor and a complete a hole. Monk is a police detective who is also kind of an a hole, but in a different way than House. Monk is a nice guy. House is not a nice guy. House is just a straight up jerk. Monk is a nice guy, but he's a guy that doesn't really consider other people's feelings very much before he says certain things. So he's not very good with the etiquette. But that being said, neither of them are really fighters. But I got to give this to Monk for a couple of things. Number one, Monk has actual police training, and on the series Monk, we do see him use his weapon a couple of times. So Monk is capable of fighting and has been trained on how to properly detain someone and all that. House, on the other hand, has no training and is physically disabled. So, Monk has, what you might call he has some mental health issues for sure, but he's not physically disabled like House. And so that gives Monk the absolute edge in that one. How extra biblical do you believe is healthy for a Christian to be until they're being unbiblical? That's a very interesting question. However, I will say this: extra biblical and unbiblical are two very different things. Okay. So, for example, uh, anything and everything having to do with a smartphone is extra biblical because smartphones are never mentioned in the Bible, right? So, it is not extra, it's not unbiblical, for example, to do what I was just doing. I was reading the Bible on the internet, right? There's nothing unbiblical about that, but it is extra biblical to say it's okay to read the Bible on the internet because in the Bible it says nothing about it. Unbiblical is when you do or say something that is contrary to what the Bible says. Okay, so unbiblical would be something like you don't the Bible is full of lies, or we don't you don't really have to follow these commandments because and you cite some reason that's not in the Bible, right? Or you start telling people it's okay to do things that are considered sinful in the Bible because it's an old book and things have changed since then, right? Especially when we start talking about sexual morality, people like to cite the idea that, well, the Bible is from thousands of years ago and things have changed, and so it's perfectly okay to do that now. Well, the problem is there's no biblical source to suggest that. You know, and you would need something biblical in order to justify something that is obviously unbiblical. So I know it's kind of a. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I'm just saying it's not as simple as extra biblical and leads to unbiblical. Unbiblical and extra biblical are two very different topics. So, going back to your original question, how extra biblical is it healthy for a Christian to be? I would say this. As far as topics that are not covered in the Bible at all, then generally speaking, extra biblical is the only way to get any information. Extra biblical also leads to one of my favorite topics, natural theology, which is, natural theology is, in fact, it's extra biblical and biblical at the same time because it's extra biblical in that if you're gleaning knowledge about God through His creation, and that's different than getting knowledge of God through reading His Word. However, in the Bible, it's endorsed to do exactly that, right? Paul writes about the idea that the creation itself screams out the existence of the Creator, and I agree with that, by the way. In fact, I think natural theology is probably a far more convincing tool for the atheist than any biblical verse you could possibly cite. Right? I did not become a Christian because somebody told me about John 3:16. I became a Christian because I couldn't reconcile the existence of the universe without a God. And I know that there are scientists that try to, Krauss being a very prominent one. Hawking tried in his day. You know, Carl Sagan tried in his day, right? But the problem you run into is a problem called infinite regress, right? No matter what solution you come up with for the existence of the universe without God, you will always hit an infinite regress wall unless you try you tried to suggest things like, well, if time started at this particular point, all you got to do is get back to that point, because before that, since there was no time, nothing happened, right? And that is kind of where some of the stuff goes. Krauss particularly uses that a little bit in his arguments, but I don't think that it really stands up to any kind of real scrutiny. It's great for the uneducated mind as far as a tool to try and recruit people to atheism, but I don't think it stands up when you try to analyze it with any kind of real rigorous analysis, because it completely falls apart. So I would say this: use the Bible as your source wherever you can. You know, but if you're studying physics, that's not in the Bible. So so study your physics. That's perfectly okay. Yeah, but if something is unbiblical, you'll know it. If I'm sitting there in a college classroom, let's say I'm taking physics, and the professor is up there talking about the importance of relativity or quantum mechanics or whatever. If the professor is just teaching about quantum mechanics, what the formulas are, how it works, all that stuff, or relativity, what the formulas are, how it works, all that stuff, I have no problem whatsoever. It's when the professor says, how religion is superstition and we need to get beyond that kind of thinking. It's like, what? I'm gonna pick a little bit of a fight there, because I'm gonna say, how does this prove there's no God, or why is it that you would say God is unnecessary, just because this process doesn't involve God directly, right? I have a real problem with saying that there's any theory that you could say therefore no God to at the end. I don't think that theory exists. And right now, the funny thing is that it's very true that some Christians believe in things that seem patently false when you observe the world. But it's also true that when you look at the world, it points to God. You can't if you can't see God in nature, that's probably because you're not a believer. And it's also very likely that you're the type of person who say, "Well, I don't see any evidence," because what you want to define as evidence is actually proof, and you can't prove anything beyond self-existence. All right, let's move on. The Earth is over 1 billion years old. That is probably, I think the current estimates are like 4.7, and I have no problem with that. Someone with skunks on their hands versus someone with boxing gloves. Well, it would depend on if the skunks were trained or not. Because if the skunks are just random feral animals, the guy with skunks on his hands is going to have a lot of difficulty, not just in the skunk spraying them, but the skunk would probably be biting, scratching, clawing, doing anything he could to get out of his hands. Whereas the guy with boxing gloves doesn't have such a problem. So while the skunk guy is trying to fight the skunks and keep them, pointed in the right direction, the boxing guy just comes over and knocks the guy out in one punch. Now the problem is the boxing guy is now going to have to deal with the skunks, unless the skunks just scurry away. Yeah, the boxing guy is probably going to win that if the skunks are not trained. If the skunks are trained, that's a little different, because now if he can command the skunks to spray on demand and to pick a target, that boxing guy is going to be in a lot of trouble. because while the spray from a skunk is certainly not fatal, if you've ever been near it when it actually happens, the spray is designed kind of with the same intent of things like pepper spray in police. It's really designed as a way to briefly, temporarily disable you while they make their escape. Right. So what you would do if you're the guy with the skunks is you have the two skunks spray the boxer on command, and then when the boxer is, stop it, gross, gross. And by the way, the skunks aim for your face. And the reason they aim for your face is because that spray will burn the crap out of your eyes and stuff. So if the skunk gets any in the boxer's face, it's game over time because it's not going to kill the boxer, but it's going to distract the boxer long enough where he's clawing in his own eyes trying to get the spray out to where the guy, even without boxing gloves, the guy will then be able to pummel on the boxer at will. And as long as he's got a decent amount of physical strength, the boxer goes down. Whew, that was a long one. There might have been life on other planets before Earth had life on it. That is entirely possible. We don't know. It's the interesting thing about the idea of alien extraterrestrial life is that it's not mentioned in the Bible at all, right? There's nothing in the Bible that describes extraterrestrial intelligence. There's nothing in the Bible that describes life anywhere but on Earth. The Bible doesn't describe penguins. That doesn't mean penguins don't exist, right? The Bible doesn't describe kangaroos. That doesn't mean kangaroos don't exist. They just weren't in the region where the Bible is written. And while I do believe in divine inspiration, I also believe that the authors of the Bible only wrote what they could understand. And so if Jesus says every creature, people, you look at Noah's Ark, and say, oh, two of every unclean animal and 7 pairs of clean animals. But if that's the case, then you're going to sit there going, well, and I've heard this in a Bible, because I went to a Bible college briefly that was trying to teach young Earth creationism as fact, and the person would ask, so were there kangaroos on the ark? Were there koala bears on the ark? And people would be thinking about that for a minute and go, well, probably not. He goes, well, then how do they exist after the flood? They must have come, they must have been on the ark, which means that they hopped their way from Australia to where we believe somewhere in the Middle East. We don't really know where Eden was, but most people believe it was in the same general area as modern day Palestine. But we don't honestly know. How did the kangaroos get there, and how did they get back? No answer to that. Apparently the kangaroos just hopped their way across several countries in 3 continents. Doubt that, but that's what some people believe. I tend to go with the idea that the flood was more likely a localized event. Maybe the flood was designed to just wash away the garden so there was no evidence of it. But we'll never know for sure on this side of eternity. So Sean in the house says, good morning, Michael and chat. Good morning, Sean. Yes, I know you're Schwario. You don't have to tell me. Aravic in the house says, good morning. Good to see you, Aravic. Sean then just says, Michael, did you see the trailer for the new Masters of the Universe movies? Sorry to go off topic. Yes, I did. We talked about it on the Nerd Fights Friday night. And I was unimpressed. Street Preacher, yada, 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 was an entire Seinfeld episode. Well, now that you know what yada means, puts that episode in a different light, doesn't it? Elaine, yada, 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 sex. We went for dinner, had a nice dessert, yada, yada, yada. He never called me again. Well, that's technically correct, right? Yes, they talked about on Friday night on Nerd Fight. Oh, yeah, what we talked about. Yes. Link is on the Nerd Fights channel if you want to hear. Yeah. Thank you very much. And that's why you put the link to that in there. Thank you very much, Stan. I appreciate it. In the Command and Conquer series, Cain is the bad guy in those games. Yes, but that is not the same Cain. This is in the Command and Conquer series, Cain is just your stereotypical evil bald guy with a goatee. Don't get me wrong, I love the Command and Conquer series of games, but yeah, very. And the interesting thing though is that Cain in the Command and Conquer games, he leads the Brotherhood of Nod in the fight against GDI, the Global Defense Initiative. There's a myth about a guy who, at the time of Jesus, was cursed to walk the earth forever until the end of time. Actually, I think that was Cain, wasn't it? The wandering Jew. But let's see. Who helps if I can type correctly? Is the let's see. Okay, so yeah, I guess the Wandering Jew is a figure from medieval European Christian legend, often named Hosserus or Cartophilus, cursed by Jesus to walk the earth in a constant sorrow until the second coming for taunting or refusing him on the way to the crucifixion. So apparently someone was taunting him while he was on his way to be crucified, and so Jesus cursed him. That is absolutely silly. And the reason I think it's silly is twofold. One, we have four accounts of the crucifixion, and I don't believe any of them have this particular event in them. And number two, it would be completely out of character for Jesus to basically get so pissed off as to use godly superpower to curse this guy when he let the Pharisees punch him in the face while blindfolded and didn't do anything to them. Why the heck is he going to curse some random guy who is probably his only information on Jesus was Roman propaganda or Pharisaic propaganda? That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, the Wandering Jew I don't buy into. I mean, if you want to say Cain was the wandering Jew because God put the mark on him and said no one would ever kill him, that I could buy a lot faster than the idea that Jesus created the wandering Jew because he was pissed off at somebody. Let's see. San Wu Kong versus Dark Side. I don't know who Sam Wu Kong is, so can't do that one. Then Robert, finally, I'm sorry, it's a half an hour ago, says shalom today. Michael, shalom, shalom. Hope you are doing well, Robert. Trustin, my good friend, says something I'm not clear on. Do we know why Cain's offering was not acceptable to God? I've always been confused by that. Well, this is one of those things, and I did talk about it when we read it, but it's one of those things that it's not stated in the text, but you also have to keep in mind who the text was written for. And I know people say, well, the Bible's supposed to be written for all people of all time. That's true. But it did have the Bible was inspired by God, but written by men. And when I say that, that means that the inspired by God part means the Bible contains the truth of God's nature, God's desires for us, all that good stuff. Because God was basically helping these guys write it, but it was written by humans, right? So the 5 books of Moses, as best we know, were written by Moses, right? And probably finished by Joshua when, after Moses died. But we know that the letters of Paul were written by Paul. So when they are writing, they're writing what they can know and understand, but they're also writing, and this is the hard part for us today, with certain assumptions of what you would know, right? So, for example, and I use this example a lot because it makes a lot of sense. If I'm writing, let's say that God has called upon me to write a epistle, just like the ones that Paul wrote, right? So I start writing an epistle, and I'm like, well, gee, God, what do you want me to, what do you want me to cover? And so God starts explaining to me what he wants me to write. And let's say that he says, I want you to write a comprehensive book that will list every single creature I've ever created. And you're going to write down the nature of their genome and how that works. And I'd look at God like, how am I gonna? And they'd be like, I'm just messing with you. I want you to write so so God does all that to me, right? So then when I'm writing the actual letter, the epistle, I might put, and the Lord spoke to me and said, I want you to do this impossible task of writing all this stuff that would take 100 years to write. However, I then found out God was pulling my leg, and He really just wanted me to write and move on. Well, if I wrote that, this is a very long-winded way to get to the what I'm trying to make a point of here, Tristan. But when I'm making a fundamental assumption that you understand what the words "pulling my leg" means. Now, you guys all know when I said that, I'm meaning basically that someone is messing around with you. They're kidding. It is not a serious, this it was not a serious request. That's all very clearly, uh, you know, uh, included in what I just wrote. But 100, 200, 300, 1,000, 2,000 years from now, somebody reads that note that I wrote to you that says God was pulling my leg, and they might say, why would the Lord yank on my limb? Right? And so that's the problem with some of this. We have to take into account historical and cultural context in addition to biblical context. But you do have to think about who were these written for. So when Moses wrote the account in Genesis of Cain and Abel, he was writing that for his fellow Jews that were there, at Mount Sinai, right? So, based on that, I think that most people would already have a clear understanding of certain things that we today might not. One of which is covered later in a book by Moses is the nature of the various offerings and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to include in your offering. Now, I don't know if the book of Exodus and or Leviticus were written before or after the he wrote Genesis, but it's probably he probably would assume since everybody that's going to read this is going to be a Jew, that he doesn't have to cover what is a acceptable versus unacceptable sacrifice, because that's something that all the Jews understand, is that what is acceptable is that you give of your first fruits, that when you first yield anything from a crop or your firstborn, if you're a rancher, whatever your first generated product is, a portion of that goes to the Lord, not random. I'm just going to throw some veggies in when I get a chance. which is kind of what it states as far as Cain's offering was just some fruit, whereas Abel's offering was specifically the firstborn. And so that's why Abel's offering, I think, was acceptable and Cain's was not. By the way, Tristan, and I know we'll talk about it on Wednesday, but if you're still here, have you managed to get an email set up or anything that we can start to use? Because I'd like to get it going hopefully in the next week or so. For the rest of you, I'm setting up an email with Tristan. Tristan is in a small group. We meet every Wednesday morning and talk about biblical things. And I want to offer anybody that wants to join that small group a chance to. And so we're going to creating an email for it. And Tristan is going to be basically the gatekeeper of that email for me. So if you send an email to that email address saying, hey, I want to join the small group, Tristan's going to respond to you in an email saying something to the effect of, well, are you a Christian? Because it's important that anybody that joins the small group, this is not a debate group. This is a Bible study. And so if you're interested in joining it to debate about godly topics because you want to get with me in a one-on-one kind of environment, no, that's not what it's for. This is strictly done as a Bible study. But right now, it's only the two of us, and we need a couple more people. Let's see. No kidding, the Titan doesn't work out at all. They were actually riding mammoths. Yeah, see, there you go. I would be a Trex and eat my. I assume you mean T Rex. I would be a T Rex and eat Michael because Michael would be tasted. Michael be a tasty Triceratops for me to eat. Okay, Josiah, it's a little weird, but okay. How you doing? Says, you must have talked about Seth before I got here. Yes, probably. Actually, we didn't talk about Seth a lot. We just mostly talked about Cain and Abel. And actually mostly just about Cain. Okay, it's your stream link talking about Master of the Universe. Yeah, I figured that one out. Thank you, though. Elmer Fudd versus Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef. Whoa. Elmer Fudd versus the two of them? I mean, come on. Clint Eastwood by himself would eradicate Elmer Fudd, right? Because Clint has got that big old gun from the what's what's the name of those movies he made when he was a cop? Not Death Wish, but oh gosh. Anyway, but yeah, are you feeling lucky, punk? Which he never actually said that, but yeah. My outside looks like yours. Like ice and more ice. Yep. That's why I'm not going anywhere. Well, House is a cripple, although he's also got a lot of painkillers, so he might not stop due to the injury. Now, I think that, as a cripple myself, I would dare say that House is definitely going to lose that fight. Let's see. And then Troy, good to see you, my friend, throws in Numbers 23:19. God is not a man that he should lie, nor son of man that he should repent, change his mind. Has he said, and has he not do it? And will he? Has he said, and will he not do it, or has he spoken, and will not make it good? Okay, not sure what your point is. Jonah 3:10. God saw Nineveh's repentance and relented on his disaster, and you try to put repented there. He's, that he had said he would bring upon them. So I assume what you're trying to do is to try and illustrate what you see as a conflict between these two verses. By the way, I really don't like doing your homework for you. If you want to make a point, Troy, just make the point. You don't need to, just throw a couple of Bible verses that you think are conflicting and not throw any commentary on there, because I want to know what your specific question is. However, I'm going to assume that because you threw repented in in parentheses, you're trying to suggest that Jonah is a direct violation of Numbers, right? And let me be clear about something. Repentant is not change your mind. That's not what repent means. It doesn't, like, for example, if I know I use this example a lot, but it's an easy one to use. So if I watch some porn and I repent, that doesn't mean, well, I changed my mind about porn. No, that's not what it means. What repentance means is to turn away from something, to not just to change your mind, but to actively move away from something in particular, because it is something that you did that is bad, right? So you repent of sin. You don't repent of what your favorite flavor of ice cream is because you change your mind one day. That's not repentance. So that's the number one thing, is that you're putting you're basically trying to put your definition of repentance here in order to make these two verses appear in conflict. Because it says God doesn't need to repent. Well, he doesn't. Just like, Jesus didn't need to be baptized, because the reason that you were baptized in John's day was for the repentance of sin. That was what John was calling people to do, was to repent. And Jesus did not need to be baptized. And when he approached John, John said, "You don't need to be. You should be baptizing me. Come on, you do not need this." And Jesus said, "No, please baptize me so that the scriptures would be fulfilled." And so he did it. So he didn't do it so that because he needed to repent of sin. He did it because he wanted to fulfill all righteousness. And obviously he did do that. Anyway, so Troy, if you got something else you want to say about that, say it yourself. I honestly don't have a lot of respect for that type of objection, I guess you would say, because it's just random scriptures. And like I said, you want to have a discussion about it, fine, but either you don't understand what those scriptures are saying, or I don't understand your point. Jeff says, because I thought Adam and Eve had Seth after Abel was killed. Yes. So it was Adam and Eve had Cain first, then Abel, then Cain killed Abel, and then they had Seth. You are correct. Josiah says, if there were people on during there are people on during the time of Cain and Abel, maybe the God made the earth is how science think the earth was created. If there were people on, I assume on earth during the time of Cain and Abel, maybe the way God made earth is how science thinks the earth was created. Yes. I mean, that's why I say I have no problem with the geological science of the Earth's formation and all that. I have no problem with evolutionary theory as far as biologists have it. The funny thing is, keep in mind, evolution has nothing to do with the beginning of life. In order for evolution to happen, life must already exist, because evolution is all about mutation during reproduction. And if a mutation is advantageous, that a trait would be passed on, because that anybody with that mutation would be more likely to reproduce. But there's nothing about evolution that can deal with, well, how did life start? That's not evolutionary theory. Then you get into abiogenesis. The problem is that, you know, while I would not die on the hill of it, but I would say as of right now, it would appear that without divine intervention, abiogenesis simply can't happen. And people that try to say, but wait, they created life in a laboratory. No, they did not. So get your facts right. That nobody has been able to create life in a laboratory. They've managed to create some amino acids, but that is not creating life. It's not even close. Let's see. What religion were you before you became a Christian? How old were you? Well, I was raised in a progressive Christian church. Progressive meaning that they didn't call themselves progressive Christians back then, but it's basically where progressive Christianity came from. And that was the blend of basically Christianity with a little bit of New Age thrown into it, and making a lot of arguments that basically things that are forbidden in the Bible are okay now because society has moved past that, or because that's no longer an issue of reproduction. Like, for example, on the homosexuality thing, at the time of the Jews in the Old Testament, the first and primary commandment of God in the Old Testament was to reproduce, right? To be fruitful and multiply. Well, if you are homosexual, that commandment cannot be fulfilled, right? Because, two men can't make another person. However, now today, population is not as big a problem. And so, because of that, it's okay now, even though it wasn't okay for them. That might be and I used to think that way, by the way, and that might be an applicable solution to the problem, if not for the fact that it's reiterated in the New Testament that sexual purity is something to be taken seriously. However, so I know I'm going around, I beat around the bush a lot with these questions, but that's okay. That's why my live streams are too long. But after oh gosh, it was probably around in high schoolish age, is when I finally kind of, I wouldn't say renounced, but gave up on my Christian faith, because I was seeing way too many contradictions, way too many problems, and I just came to the conclusion this was all a bunch of hogwash. And so I gave up on being a Christian sometime around high school, and I didn't become a Christian again until I believe, in my mid 20s. My wife could probably tell you far better than I can exactly how old I was. But I don't remember when we started going to Lighthouse Church, so I'm sure she probably does. If you're listening, babe, you can tell me how old was I when I got saved, as they say. George of the Jungle versus Spear from Primal. Oh, come on, that's not even close. Primal, of all your ancient barbarians and stuff, Primal is probably going to win. Beavis versus Butthead. I would say, as long as Beavis doesn't go into Cornholio mode, it's going to be Butthead. Beowulf versus King Arthur. Ooh, well, that's actually a tough one because, both of them are renowned combat veterans of similar eras. So, man, that is a tough one. But I would say this. So, the big problem you run into with Beowulf is, while he's a great fighter and you can argue definitely on par with King Arthur, King Arthur has the sword of the gods in Excalibur, and so he literally has a magic sword. Beowulf, I don't think, can counter that. So I'm going to give it to Arthur. Homer versus Mo. I think Mo wins that one because while Mo is a lazy, good-for-nothing bastard. Homer is even worse, and Homer is as fat as I am, and Mo, I think, at least has to deal with the unruly patrons of his bar, and so Mo has way more combat experience than Homer. Stan says, which is interesting. Does the Bible ever talk about stars or constellations or anything similar to astronomy? Yes and no. I would say, it does talk about it in an indirect way. Now, astrology is, I believe, if I remember correctly, is mentioned directly, but astrology is different than astronomy. But it is mentioned because it talks about don't use the stars and stuff as signs for things to come. In Genesis chapter 1, it mentions that the sun, and the moon would be used to mark the days. And let me see if I find the exact phraseology here. We go to Genesis 1. Come on. Load. There we go. And should probably switch over to this one. Genesis 1. Let's see. That's where he created the sky, vault in the sky. Let's see. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky. That would be the stars. And let me make sure, is that the wife? Yes. I put it in the chat, but you're behind. So 29. Okay, there you go. I was 29. Thank you, babe. So let there be a vault of the sky to separate the day from the night. Or let there be lights in the sky, sorry, in the vault of the sky to separate day and night. Let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And so then it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser night to govern the night. He also made the stars. And so basically the stars, the sun, and the moon are all mentioned here as ways to mark. It's kind of interesting. I mean, obviously day and night, but also sacred times and days and years. This is astronomy here, because astronomy is actually, how do you tell what month it is in the year? If let's say you just dropped and you say it's a random time, you need to figure out what day is this. And you have access to all sorts of information, but the only observable thing you can look at is the sky. And so, well, the good news is the constellations will tell you exactly what time of year it is. Theorizing about the stars seems like something every human would naturally do. As far as, yeah, I think you're right. And by the way, modern day astronomy, as well and physics and stuff, all spawned from the church, from people who wanted to know more about God by studying his creation. That's the reason that we had Galileo, Copernicus, Newton, all the classic astronomers and physicists that gave us modern day physics did it because they were inspired by God. And so, but I know they would be atheists if they were around today. Not necessarily. You don't know. And these guys were very devoted Christians, and their Christianity is the very reason they got into science. Do they mention the moon? Well, I just read to you what it actually says, but so yes, they're mentioned, but I don't think there's not a lot about it. But I do think, like I said, I think astrology is condemned. Let's see, okay. Astrology is mentioned in the Bible, but it's overwhelmingly presented as negative. But it's based on context. Forbidden as a pagan divination and a substitute for trusting God. Yeah, so it's this is just the Google AI, but it kind of is confirming what I was thinking here. Is that while the heavenly bodies, sun, moon, stars, which we just read in Genesis 1, are cited for signs and seasons, the practice of interpreting them for fortune telling or guidance is considered sinful. And let's see. I think this is about the only thing. The only time that I think astrology is, I wouldn't say put in a positive light, but I would say put in a neutral light, would be the Magi. The when the wise men in Matthew chapter 2 show up. Well, let's take a look. Like I said, whenever I'm talking about something that's in the Bible, we should always verify what's in the Bible. I believe it's Matthew 2, yeah. So if we go to Matthew chapter 2, no, 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 no. All right, so King Herod, let's see, oh, here we go. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." This is why people always put a star on the top of their Christmas tree, or they put, if they have a little nativity scene, they'll put a star overhead because this is the star that the Magi supposedly followed. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So when he had called together all the people, chief priests, and the teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for what the prophet has written, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are no means amongst the rulers of Judea. Far out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them that about the exact time the star had appeared. He sent to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report him to me, and so I may too go and worship him." After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over a place where the child was. So they literally followed the star to where Jesus was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, not the manger, the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then they went back a different way to avoid Herod. So the interesting thing about all this is, so remember, Herod, well, if we go down just a little bit, well, Herod realized that he'd been outwitted by the Magi. He was furious because Herod wanted to kill Jesus, of course, and gave the orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under. So we put all this together, and what does it mean? Well, the interesting thing is, it says up here that Herod found out from the Magi the exact time the star had appeared. And so remember, when the star appeared, the Magi were like, "Ooh, we got to check this out," and they started heading towards Judea. So so we know that Herod asked the Magi exactly when the star appeared, and then later he orders them to kill every male who is 2 years old or younger. And so that would imply very heavily that the star appeared 2 years in the past, that Jesus was therefore 2 years old by the time the Magi showed up. He was not an infant in the manger as is commonly depicted in various stories and stuff. This is just another Christian myth that comes up a lot. Is that the three? By the way, it never says three wise men. It just says magi from the east. But so these magi are used astrology to find Jesus, and it's never condemned as being sinful that they did this. But this is probably the only time astrology is shown in a somewhat favorable light. All right, so let's continue on. Bradley, we switch back, says, anyone still waiting on Beyond Good and Evil 2 to come out? I have seen stuff about it lately on YouTube. I don't even know what that is. I apologize. Uh, Daredevil versus the Shatter? I don't know who the Shatter is. Maybe you mistyped it. I don't know what is this. Um, I'm not sure. Hold on just a second. Oh, okay. So that is cool. Sorry, something from my daughter. Let's see. All right. All right. Back to it. Yeah, I'm not sure who the Shatter is. I need some clarification on that. Maybe you mean somebody else. But how does Mr. Bean defeat Pennywise? The same way Mr. Bean defeats almost everybody by accident. Um, in the case of Pennywise, Pennywise, of course, works solely on fear, right? So Pennywise projects an illusion, if you will, to you that is based on whatever it is you fear the most. And so when he attempts to do this to Mr. Bean, well, what would Mr. Bean's greatest fear be? Maybe a girl? I don't know. But whatever it is, Mr. Bean is terrified immediately and stumbles back from the thing that he fears, trips, and when he trips, he falls down. And when he falls down, he lands on a piece of wood and launches that piece of wood into the air. And the piece of wood happens to have a rusty nail sticking out of it that hits Pennywise in the head. Uh, Robert says, I'm doing okay. No loss of power or water, thank God. Absolutely. And us too. I'm amazed that we have not lost power. And I'm very, very thankful for that. Sun Wukong is a character from Journey to the West. Okay. I don't know what is Journey to the West, a movie, a TV show, a comic book? I don't know. But, well, obviously I don't know that character. Multi Gunman asked, what are your thoughts on the movie The Book of Eli? Is it a good fictional general Christianity movie, etc.? Book of Eli, that's the one where Denzel plays a blind man who has the last known copy of the Bible, and he is on a quest to take it. I don't remember where he's taking it, like a library or something like that. And people want the book so that they can control others through religion. So, is it a good movie? I would say, yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it. But if I'm talking about it then from a strictly Christian perspective, do I think it's a good movie? Not so much. It generally, while it doesn't say a lot about Christianity specifically, it does, in fact, kind of portray Christianity as just another religion, and religions are just these things that people use to manipulate other people. So, in that respect, I would say no, probably not. Now, can religion be used to manipulate others? Absolutely. But that's not the point of Christianity. And so I'm not saying that people don't use religion in nefarious ways, and I'm not saying that it's not possible to use religion in nefarious ways. But the Book of Eli and many other movies and TV shows tend to imply that that is the core of Christianity, that Christianity was created specifically to manipulate people. And a lot of people believe that. A lot of people think the whole thing is fake and was just written by a group of people that were trying to manipulate the masses. The problem is that when you look at the actual narrative of the Bible, that makes no sense. Let's see. Raj says, I saw a video yesterday on YouTube about an inventor, aka small company, that had invented the first real world speeder bike. The first real world speeder bike. Very expensive though, a $2,000 down payment, then later on an $80,000 payment. And then it says followed by a final payment of 787 some thousand. Wow. And then Volonut is their YouTube channel with all of their links. Well, that sounds just a little bit crazy as far as the price tag. While having a real speeder would be cool, I'm not paying 80 grand for it, and I don't have 80 grand to throw away anyway. And let's see. Let's see. Okay, I gotta see that. And let's see. Okay, so sorry for taking so long there. I'm just trying to get this to come up. All right, so it's Volonaut. All right, so Volonaut Air Bike, test riding a flying speeder bike. Okay. And looks interesting. I'll definitely check out their channel. A little short video on it. Let me see. I can actually get on the thing. It looks a little weird. And it's kind of tiny. They don't really show how it works in this video, but yeah, that's cool. I will definitely check it out, but yeah, I ain't paying 80,000, especially for such a tiny little thing. And it can't have, with the size of it, it cannot have a long range. Let's see. Miss Moneypenny in the house, off of her cocaine binge, says, Michael, my overnight snow has turned into rain. It's 90 degrees in my area with a low of 15 degrees. I'll need ice skates if I want to go anywhere. Yeah, don't go anywhere. Thank you very much. I could not remember the name. Dirty Harry. Are you feeling lucky? Well, do you, punk? Yeah. Monk versus Dexter Morgan. Well, that's a more interesting matchup because, both Monk and Dexter are police investigators. Dexter specifically works in forensics. And they have some crossover as to their skill set. What's interesting, though, is that Dexter only really has one combat move, and that is sneak up behind somebody and jab them with his sedative. And then once they're unconscious, he drags them to his kill rooms. So even though Dexter certainly has a much higher body count as far as number of people successfully killed, I still got to give it to Monk because Monk has combat training, and by all appearances, Dexter does not. And never ever put ketchup on hot dogs. Why not? Oh, is that a Dirty Harry thing? Track reviewer in the house says this is what I would like to give Kurtzman for all the bad trek he's been giving us the last 8 years. What? And hi to all. I'm not sure. This is what I would like to give Kurtzman for all the bad trek he's been giving. What, my live stream? You saying I'm that bad? Harold Francis, Dirty Harry, versus John McClane, Die Hard, versus Martin Riggs, Lethal Weapon, versus Frank Drebin, Naked Gun. Now that would be a very interesting matchup. So if we do it, let's just say Hunger Games style, right? So basically, we start out with the four of them in four corners of a small area. In the center, some weapons, and then they all go on a mad dash for their weapons. And here's the problem. So Dirty Harry, he has this problem. He's going to be walking while everybody else is running. And so Dirty Harry is going to be eliminated right off the bat because he'll be still walking towards the gun pile when somebody shoots him dead. Now with John McClane, and he'll probably be shot, by the way, by Martin Riggs because he's the crazy one, right? So, and so he'll be a little more trigger happy. So when it comes to John McClane and we'll just say Dirty Harry versus Riggs from Lethal Weapon, right? So and then it's kind of interesting because you mentioned Frank Drebin from Naked Gun, but you don't say which Frank Drebin, senior or junior, because it does make a difference. So I think if it's Frank Drebin Senior, the Leslie Nielsen version, I think that basically when John McClane and Martin Riggs are going to be like facing each other, like their faces will be an inch apart, and they're like trying to intimidate each other. Frank Drebin's just gonna his head's gonna pop up out of nowhere, and he's say, "Hey guys, maybe I can help." And then immediately both of them are going to shoot Frank Drebin in the head. So Frank Drebin dies very, very quickly in that scenario. That being said, if it's Frank Drebin Jr., Liam Neeson character, he would absolutely curb stomp everybody else because not only does he have the comedic power of being able to do anything that is funny, he also is a complete and total badass because, unlike his father, he has a particular set of skills. And so I think that Frank Drebin Jr. would win if he was in the Frank Drebin. And I think that, man, it's a tough one between McClane and Riggs. But I think in the end, I'm going to have to give it to Riggs because I think that he's just unhinged enough to where the Hunger Games style of competition will be something that Riggs will really enjoy. Meanwhile, John McClane will be just complaining about how he didn't want to do this when Riggs takes him out. And then ask what about Cobra? What, Stallone? Please. Let's see. The last few days have sucked. It's not been over -2 with wind chill for the last 2 days. Yeah, hasn't been that cold here, but yeah, it's been a little bit of weather. I'm going with Martin Riggs. Well, I went with Martin Riggs as long as it's Frank Drebin Sr. If it's Frank Drebin Jr., Frank Drebin wins. With John McClane, a close second. Well, it looks like you and I agree. I was going cop movies that have multiple sequels. Oh, there you go. Well, that's a good way to nail it down. In defense, in a defense lawyer battle, Perry Mason versus Ben Matlock. Wow. Now that's an interesting one. So both, but the problem is that you can't have a defense attorney against another defense attorney because that wouldn't really work. But let's just say it's a civil battle, and the two of them ended up on opposite sides because you got to do something. Now Perry Mason and Matlock, both classic, lawyers from TV. Perry Mason is the OG of the two, but let me see. Let's see. Final. See if I can find it. Let's see. So Perry Mason won 271 cases, and he lost the case of the terrified typist and the case of the deadly verdict. So it looks like he lost. He also lost a civil case in the case of the dead ringer. All right, so it looks like his total record would be 271 to 3. So now let's look at Ben Matlock. All right. Let's see. They thought I was wanting to talk about the Nielsen ratings. Okay. Battle Line, the iconic criminal defense attorney played by Andy Griffith in the television series 1986 to 1995. Boasted a near perfect track record. Here you go. Blah, blah, blah. Overall record. Ben Matlock rarely lost a case. His signature movie involved him identifying the real killer. Blah, 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 blah. But what was his final track record? Let's see. 193 episodes, but let's see. We'll try this. How many cases did Ben Matlock lose? All right, so he lost the stripper, he lost the convict, he lost the Black Widow, he lost the brothers. And and it says there's more, but let's see. But even there, so if we just take those 4 losses, based on the number of episodes of 193, that would mean that he has a record of around 188 and 4. So 188 to 4 versus 271 to 3. Perry Mason clearly is the superior lawyer, and therefore Perry Mason wins. Sorry about having to do all the math on that one. And Trucker Reader says, "Hi, my Canadian friend." Oh, okay. Let's see. Saved or born again? Well, that's the thing. Like those 2 words are kind of synonymous. I don't generally. I don't use either one of them much when I'm describing my personal journey because I think that saved has a unfortunate connotation that people take of it as somehow meaning that I'm superior to others or that I have made it in some way. Like, oh, yep, I'm saved and therefore I'm good. I'm done. Me and God, yeah, we're like that. So, no, I don't like to say that because that's what people take from it. And I also don't like the idea that salvation is an event in your life. It's not. It's salvation or being saved, as most evangelical Christians would put it. It's not a singular event that happens. It is the beginning of a lifelong journey. And that journey never gets easy. And so if people say it's easy, they're lying to you. And the journey does not end until you are dead. So nobody has arrived. Nobody is truly saved past tense. They are working, as Paul would say, they are working out their salvation as they live. So born again, I think, is a better term to use. But born again Christian also has its negative connotations to it. Most people, when they think of a born again Christian, they're thinking of somebody who's extremely judgmental, somebody who is generally a bad influence on their local society, etc. So I tend not to use either in my when I'm describing my own personal journey. That being said, if I had to pick one as being the superior thing to say, I would probably say born again. And as my wife posted, I was born again at the age of 29. And it's kind of funny because I kind of like in the and let's see. To all right, man, I cannot type with a dang. All right, so but yeah, so I like if you there's a classic song called Rocky Mountain High by John Denver, and it starts out with he was born in the summer of his 27th year, and he's talking about someone being born again. He's not talking about, obviously the weird contradiction that would sound like. But yeah, so if you look at, I think, the biblical terminology, I think born again is the time you are born again is the time that most people would say you are saved, right? That's when you begin your journey. And the idea is you are born into this journey. And so, and then as my daughter pointed out, the journey itself is generally called sanctification. That's the biblical term for it. But that journey does not end until the day you die. When did astrology start? Was it the Asians that developed the horoscope? The horoscope as we know it is, I'm not sure when it started, but let's see. When did the modern. All right. Modern astrology began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, making a shift from a predictive event based forecasting to a focus on psychology and self development. But let's see. When did. All right, so if we look at astrology as a whole, astrology began in Mesopotamia, ancient Babylon, around 2000 to 3000 BC, which is right about the same time that Judaism started. Merging as a system to interpret celestial omens such as, I don't even know how to pronounce that, but let's see, yeah. predict weather and political events, and evolved into personal horoscopes with the oldest known individual chart dating to 410 BC. I'm impressed. This person, I don't know where the AI stands on these things, but the Google AI put BC, not BCE. Kind of surprised. And Lore Reloaded, the my crazy friend who, man, I wish we were still making those videos. That was so fun. So, question, and not to troll, I've always found this interesting. The lesser light to make the night. Dark is an absence of light. So, do you think there's more context here? Well, it doesn't say the lesser light makes the night. It says that the lesser light governs the night, if I remember correctly. Let's go back to Genesis 1. And da, da, da. And no, I did not talk about that specifically, Laura. And so I do think that's an interesting question. All right, so I think we're looking at, yeah, here we go. Let there be lights to the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times, 10 years. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to give the light on the earth. And it was so, and God made two great lights, the lesser great light to, or the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. So the night is not the moon. The light from the moon does not make the night, but the moon is basically the governance of night. And I don't even think, see, the problem is people put, anthropomorphize this stuff. It's not suggesting the moon is a living thing or anything like that, but that the moon is the light source that we use at night as opposed to the sun. And in both cases, we can use their position to determine, the time of the year and stuff like that. And we can, in the case of the moon, we can also use the phases of the moon to determine the time of the month, particularly if you're going on a lunar-based calendar, which the Jews did at that time. Trek Reviewer says General George S. Patton or any Starfleet admiral versus any Starfleet admiral other than Kirk or Picard. Any Starfleet admiral, but not Kirk or Picard. That is a tough one. Let's see. Trying to think of, and I should probably switch screens here so that we're not looking at that. All right, let's see what we get here. The toughest admiral is Admiral Nechayev, but she would absolutely get curb stomped by George Patton. She'd be able to dress him down, I think, but yeah, that'd be it. Let's see. If there any Canadians are my key, other than Admiral William Ross from the Dominion War and Admiral Charles Vance. Okay, there's a good one. Charles Vance. Because if we're looking at straight up combat, I don't, because if you're going to try to do strategery as far as your competition, well, then they're going to have an equal playing field because you obviously can't have starships going up against tanks, right? That wouldn't hardly be fair. But if you're talking about straight up hand to hand combat, Patton versus just about anybody in the Starfleet universe, I think Patton's going to win. But if you're talking about strategery, that's still a tough one because Patton was good. But, because I'm thinking like Admiral Ross that they're talking about from the Dominion War is, well, really, Cisco made most of the tough decisions. So, And so since and Charles Vance, he didn't really even do anything. Let's see. And Admiral Jellicoe was he was a really tough admiral as far as a ship commander, but again, strategy we really didn't see much from him. So I'm going to just have to give it to Patton. I think the sun's a light bulb and the moon's a mirror. Sometimes you can see both, but the bulb and the mirror, that's the morning moon. That's an interesting way of putting it. Okay, so there's George S. Patton versus any Starfleet admiral. Trying to clarify that one. Old Spice Guy versus Randy Savage. Old Spice Guy wins almost, I guess almost anyone. Keep in mind, when you have superhuman abilities and stuff, it kind of is a cheat. An Old Spice Guy, you don't realize it. Think about it. He has the ability to materialize anything and everything he wants. I'm on a horse. So it's going to be very difficult to defeat a guy like that. Let's see. Haven't heard about Beyond Good and Evil, but it's looks like a new Fable game. It's finally coming out. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about it. Except I don't think Philip Morney is involved. I assume that's somebody over at the the Fable. I meant to say Shredder. Okay, but I don't remember the rest of it, and it's been a long time. So you're gonna, I don't, yeah, I don't remember who. I remember it was something that could be Shredder, but I don't remember who was against. Spoilers. Okay, finding out he's blind is the big surprise ending. Sorry. You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. Don't listen to what I said about a Denzel Washington movie that came out, 15 years ago or whatever. Sing the Banana Split Show theme song. Sure, give me some money and then I'll think about it. I'm not doing that for free. Archie Bunker versus Fred. Fred. I assume you mean Fred Sanford. Well, that's an interesting one because Archie Bunker and Fred Sanford, both cantankerous old men. Both like to sit a lot, and both are generally horrible human beings. So the thing is, if you're talking straight up combat, here's the problem: Sanford is a tough old guy, but what does he do? Anytime things get bad, he fakes a heart attack, right? He basically chickens out. So I think what had happened would be plus you also have to take into account Archie Bunker is a racist sob, and so going up against someone like Sanford will only fuel his racism rage, and that will actually give him a bit of an edge in combat. So yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go to Archie. Major Chip Hazard versus Buzz Lightyear. I don't even know who is Chip Hazard. Oh, that's the dude from Small Soldiers. Okay. Well, I would have to give that one to Chip Hazard. Buzz Lightyear depends too much on his the whatchamacallit, his laser, which isn't really a laser. Okay. Check the group. What are you talking about? I don't know what. Danny, I have no idea why you sent me that because. Oh no, that was. Huh. Okay, weird. Phone's being weird. Rango versus Woody. I tell you, is that the Johnny Depp lizard guy versus Woody? I would have to give it to Woody because Woody is an inanimate object that can also, be a living being at the same time. Rango is just a lizard, and so doesn't have any superpowers that I know of, and he can't defeat a being of solid plastic. Come on now. Al Bundy versus uh, Time the Tool Man Taylor. Where are you guys even coming up with this stuff? I don't understand why you guys always ask me this stuff. Okay. Uh, Time Taylor. That's funny. I search for Time Taylor and I get a cover of Time magazine with Taylor Swift on it. Let's see. Time. We'll try it your way. We'll put Time the Tool Man Taylor. Oh, okay. It's Tim, not Time. That's why. Okay. So Tim Taylor is in the main character from Home Improvement. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So Al Bundy versus Tim Taylor. I think Tim Taylor definitely wins because Al Bundy, about the most physical thing he does on a regular basis is stick his hand in his own pants. Oh, then you say right there, Tim. Yeah. Penny loves a blizzard. Well, if you're talking about the delicious ice cream treat made by who makes blizzards? I'm forgetting. Not Wendy's, is it? Well, whoever makes it, but yeah. So maybe she likes that. John Wayne versus James T. Kirk. Oh, James T. Kirk is going to win in any fist fight against pretty much anybody, including Mr. Bean. James T. Kirk is one of the very few people that can defeat Mr. Bean. Keep in mind, James T. Kirk is the man who literally defeated a god. And so, now, granted, he didn't fight the god in hand-to-hand combat, but he did fight people with 5 times his own strength and won. So yeah, James C. Kirk, went toe to toe with a Gorn in hand-to-hand combat. Granted, the Gorn was still way more powerful, and Kirk had to outthink him, but still. And then Miss Moneypenny is saying we rarely get those. Well, yeah, we haven't had an ice storm here, and I don't even know how long. And this one was not nearly as bad as they were making it out to be, but still have to wait a little while before things are thawed enough to where I'm going to drive around safely. And then Street Preacher put another YouTube link in. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Pause that. Pause that. Pause that. Pause that. Pause that. There we go. Now you gotta make me go. So that was 27 minutes ago. Street Preacher. There it is. So what is this one? Oh, it's the dirty. Oh, okay. So let's see. This. Okay, well, Dirty Harry says no one puts ketchup, and that's just proof that Dirty Harry is going to lose that one fight because he's wrong. Even he might think that it's disgusting to put ketchup on a hot dog, but he's wrong when he says nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog. Just like one of those things like when people try to say nobody likes Star Trek Discovery, that's untrue. There are people that like Star Trek Discovery. Those people are stupid, but they do exist. By the way, I'm only kidding about the stupid thing in case you happen to be a fan of Star Trek Discovery. Mostly. Kidding, that is. Nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog. And Harry's Magnum only has 6 shots. That's true, too. And he might have already used them all, yeah. Gandalf Unrestricted versus Scarlet Witch from the MCU. Here's the problem. Gandalf Unrestricted, as you put it. You have Gandalf used in his full power. He is a pretty darn powerful wizard for sure. However, and by the way, let's not, like hand wave away physical combat. Gandalf went looking older than I do now, went toe to toe with a Balrog and won. So, yeah, don't be messing with Gandalf. And that was, by the way, Gandalf the Grey that went toe to toe with the Balrog, not Gandalf the White. So, yeah, think about that. Yes, the fight ended up killing him as well, but he still won the fight. But anyway, so Gandalf is definitely no one to sneeze at. He is a very powerful wizard. That being said, Scarlet Witch is on a whole other level. She is I know they call it chaos magic in the MCU, but her magical abilities are not limited to spell casting. Like Gandalf needs to know the spell that he's going to cast. Scarlet Witch can come up with stuff on the fly. And Scarlet Witch can alter reality itself. Gandalf can't do that. And she can do it pretty much just she can do things beyond anything Gandalf has been seen to do, and certainly any known abilities of Gandalf. So I would definitely give that one to Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch is probably one of the most powerful beings in the MCU that we've ever seen. Remember, she very easily was about to dispatch Thanos before he basically called on the ship to fire on his own troops. And yeah, Street Preacher asks for the gray or the white. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I think Scarlet Witch would win against the gray or the white. Let's see. Tweety versus Jerry. So you have Tweety, who is I don't remember what kind of bird Tweety is. Parakeet? No. I know he says it in one of the cartoons, but yeah, that's going to bug me. But Tweety is a little bird, not a big, like parrot-sized bird, but more like a little like a parakeet-sized bird. And Jerry is, of course, a mouse. And mice, if you don't know, are little tiny guys, right? So when we judge hand-to-hand combat between the two, well, Tweety has one very distinctive disadvantage, which is that he technically doesn't have arms at all. So he can't really throw a punch effectively. And Jerry, of course, isn't really much of a fighter on his own, but both of them tend to rely on impossible cartoon tropes. And so, man, that is a really, really tough one to go because Jerry is, it's funny because Jerry goes up against, of course, Tom, the cat, and Tweety goes up against Sylvester, another cat. And both of them have a pretty much perfect track record as far as defeating their said cat tormentors. Now, Jerry, we do see do things like push anvils into position to drop onto Sylvester's head. I don't think we ever see any kind of major strength feats from from Tweety like that. So I think I'm gonna have to give it to Jerry because just off of raw physical strength, I think Jerry has too much of an edge. That's gonna be my verdict is Jerry. Really, this is what you guys come up with. See, everybody comes here to just try to stump me with bizarre versus questions rather than to talk about serious theological topics. That's what I'm doomed to. That's my life. Hulk Hogan versus a Narn from Babylon 5. Are Narns, I'm trying to remember, are Narns superhuman in any way? Let's take a look. From all right, let's see. Narns from Babylon 5 possess several biological traits that can be considered superior or superhuman. Their traits include extreme resilience, physical strength. Narns are known to be significantly stronger than humans and are often considered to be physically strongest of the primary younger races. Frequently used as manual laborers and chattel slaves. Acute sensory perception, environmental and adaptation and metabolism, high pain tolerance due to their physiology. So yeah, based on all that, I'd definitely give it to a Narn over Hulk Hogan because as strong and powerful and athletic as Hulk Hogan is, or was, I mean now I don't, is he even, I think he's still alive, but now last time I saw him, he looked like just an old guy. But when he was at his prime, assume is what you're talking about. So as physically imposing and powerful as Hulk Hogan was at his prime, he's in no way, shape, or form superhuman. He's just a guy who worked out a lot and then decided that since he can't do a legitimate sport, he'd do professional wrestling. All that being said, the Narns, like I was just reading, have superhuman strength, superhuman sensory perceptions, superhuman resilience, and superhuman tolerance to pain. So I'm going to say that the Narn has way too many physical advantages and is just going to win that fight. Laxwana Troy versus the Nanny, Fran Drescher's character from The Nanny. Well, it depends on if we're talking about who's the most annoying. That's a toss-up, but although I'd probably give the most annoying trophy to Laxwana Troy over Fran Drescher in The Nanny, because at least Fran's not hard on the eyes. But even if you're not just going with the super sexist, superficial method there, I think that Fran has the advantage of youth. And so Laxwana we've only seen as an older woman. And the only advantage Laxwana has is her telepathic abilities as a Beta Z. However, we now can throw that away, apparently, but, you know, because, of course, in Starfleet Academy, Beta Zeds apparently can play basketball better than Michael Jordan. But they also are no longer totally telepathic, because why not? The So telepathy would definitely be a big advantage for the Betazoid if they still had it, but apparently they don't anymore because some writer didn't do their homework or whatever. But at any rate, so man, and still, I mean, so if we're right about the telepathy, that's a that's a real tough one because Fran Drescher doesn't have any superhuman traits. She's just really annoying. Laxwana doesn't have any. I mean, because let's be real. Laxwana, I mean, she is physically going to lose at just about anything. Like I think Fran Drescher would kick her proverbial butt as far as hand-to-hand combat. The only real advantage Laxwana has is her telepathy, but since that's been nerfed by Starfleet Academy, if all she can do is read people's emotions, as it appears the Betazoids are down to now, yeah, I'm going to have to give it to Fran Drescher. The Nanny destroys Troy's brain cells with her nasal laugh. Yeah. Oh man. Green Lantern versus Lucky from Lucky Charms. Wow, that's a different kind of matchup. Well, Lucky, of course, can materialize literally anything that he can think of. Green Lantern can, of course, create a construct of pretty much anything he can think of. And so you would think on the surface it's a toss up, or or if you're going to pick somebody, you probably pick the Green Lantern guy because Green Lanterns obviously have much more combat experience than your regular Lantern. Well, your regular Lantern, more combat experience than something like Lucky. But here's the thing: Lucky can do something that no Green Lantern can do. When Lucky materializes something using his magic, he's not materializing a construct that's dependent upon his concentration and will. He's making the real thing out of thin air. So he just sucks at it and usually picks the wrong thing. Like I love the comedian Tommy Davidson did a little routine where he's like, if Lucky were smart, he'd be like, "Oh, make a machine gun and blow the little mother away," and that that's the way Lucky should have been. But instead, he does stupid things. So I think it would really depend on if Lucky could avoid doing something stupid. There you run into a problem because Lucky always does something stupid. Where Green Lantern rarely is stupid unless Ryan Reynolds is playing the part. So I want to say Lucky because he materializes real things instead of just constructs made by hard green light. But Green Lantern does not. Because Lucky would win anything and everything he does if he wasn't so stupid and making stupid mistakes. Probably because he didn't get a proper breakfast. So, yeah, I'm going to have to give it to Green Lantern. All right, so better sheriff. The sheriff from Dukes of Hazzard or Andy Taylor? Oh, Andy Taylor easily is a better sheriff than Roscoe P. Coltrane. Come on now. Yeah, that's not even fair. Let's see. Haven't seen or heard any salt trucks here lately. I have actually seen. I should have recorded a YouTube short right there where I could say, "Hey, look, it's my truck," because I'm salty. But yeah, we did see some salt trucks. We went out yesterday, and while we were out, we did see the salt trucks are running around. But yeah. Adrian Monk versus James Bond. Oh, James Bond. That's not even close. Look, Adrian Monk is a very observant detective. If they were trying to solve a problem, Monk might be faster than Bond at that. But as far as combat is concerned, yeah, it's no contest. James Bond absolutely curb stops Adrian Monk. Man, all right. Next up, Robert says, "Salty, mind blown. I found out from a news story here on YouTube that the metal band Megadeth lives in Tennessee also. Has for several years now. Who would have thought? I had no idea that Megadeth lived in Tennessee. Not that I'm not really a Megadeth fan, but there you go. However, one thing that people forget, because everybody knows, like when they think of Nashville, they think of country music. But Nashville is very quickly has become the recording artist capital of the world. I mean, people go to Los Angeles to be actors, but they come to Nashville to be singers. And so I think that people are forgetting that. So, and there's a rising EDM community. There's obviously a lot of rockers and stuff. And doing the Uber thing, I take people to indie rock concerts all the time that are hard rock. And I mean, when I say hard rock, I don't mean like hard rock the way you meant it in the '70s. I mean like the really hardcore stuff that hurts your eardrums and stuff. That's modern stuff. Yeah. The news story is about the town they live in, honoring them for their help and charity work in the community. Dave Mustaine, I assume that's one of the guys from Megadeth, several years ago became a born again Christian. That's cool. I did not know any of that. It's kind of like what's his name? Oh, now I'm forgetting Oh gosh, just got a poster of him for my son, and I'm forgetting his name. Let's go to here. Yes, I know your deliveries are taking longer due to the storm. Um, all right, so yeah, we got that. Alice Cooper, yeah. Alice Cooper is also a born again Christian, and he's the leader of Megadeth. Yep. Randy Savage versus Fat Albert. Oh, Fat Albert easily. Keep in mind, Randy Savage, not saying that he's a wimp or anything, but he is a normal human being, and Fat Albert is superhuman. So yeah, Fat Albert is definitely going to win. I would have loved to see how General Patton would have done commanding Federation fleet versus the Dominion. That would have been really cool. The problem is that General Patton is dead, but even if he wasn't, the writers, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the writers of Deep Space Nine were terrible people or bad writers. I love Ronald D. Moore and a lot of his work. But these are not, you can only write what you know. And that's a tough thing when writers write characters that are experts in something that the writer is not an expert in. And that's why when you start with, like, one of the big problems with modern day Star Trek, Starfleet Academy is definitely suffering from this. That is that the writers don't understand science fiction very well. And so while they may, I'm not saying Starfleet Academy is all bad. There are definitely some good things about the show, but the writing is, I mean, this show should just be a contemporary drama at a college. This doesn't feel to me like takes place in the future, and so I think that's a problem. But yeah, so as far as the writers of Deep Space Nine, how are they going to write a character that's a combat strategist on the level of Patton when they don't understand even the fundamentals of that kind of thing? So like I don't believe Ronald D. Moore or any of the rest of the writers of Deep Space Nine were long-term military vets, let alone a high-ranking officer that would have done strategic sessions and stuff. So I just, so since they don't know anything about it, they just, that's one of the reasons. Like in Deep Space Nine, the Dominion weapons were completely just slicing through Federation shields, and their shields were completely effective against Federation weaponry. But then by the end of the Dominion War, as TIE fighters flying around, all the ships were just being one, Klingon bird of prey, boom, gone. Dominion, whatever you call those cockroach looking ships, boom, gone. They're just one shotting them over and over and over. And to me, that, I know a lot of people love Deep Space Nine's Dominion War. While I did enjoy a lot about the Dominion War, I think that the battles towards the end of the Dominion War were its weakest points. Even the battle in Sacrifice of Angels, well, a lot of people cite that as like this really awesome space battle in Deep Space Nine. It's To me, it's part of what broke that show. Think about, like, it's similar to the problem of the Enterprise in Picard season 3, where they're flying it around like it's an X-wing. That bothers me. Beyonder versus the Old Spice Guy. Well, now that's a little different. Old Spice Guy can manipulate reality in order to get anything he wants, but the Beyonder is literally the living embodiment. At least, okay, so I know the Beyonder's changed because now the Beyonder is like a race of these super beings, and I don't quite know what their power levels are since they redid them in Marvel. But I'm talking OG Beyonder was the literal living embodiment of an entire universe. He was like the eternity, except from another universe. That makes the Beyonder ridiculously powerful, and so I don't think the Old Spice Guy would last more than about a quarter of a second. Shredder versus Daredevil. Okay, so Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles versus Daredevil. You know, you would think, well, Shredder's got the cool armor. He's a martial artist, and he can go toe to toe with four of the greatest martial artists of all time, namely the Turtles. All of which is true, but Shredder's still not superhuman. And I think that Daredevil's radar sense, or whatever you want to call it, and innate superior reflexes and stuff would just give him too much of an edge that I don't think that Shredder could counter. Nash Bridge versus Sonny Crockett. Well, I know who Sonny Crockett is, but I don't know who Nash Bridge is off the top of my head. But let's look him up. All right. Well, Nash Bridges is a television series, so it must. Uh, so not sure. Oh, but Don Johnson played Nash. Okay, so which is kind of funny because they showed a 2021 clip of the two of them. Like I guess they were gonna do I don't know if they ever did, but apparently they're gonna do a movie about Nash Bridges. But anyway, so and it's versus Sonny Crockett. Oh, because Sonny Crockett is played by the. Okay. Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because you got two characters played by the same guy. And they're similar types of characters. So, but here's what I'm going to say. You see, Nash Bridges is name. I don't know. I don't watch the show, so I don't know that much about it. But yeah, because it says even though Nash Bridges works in San Francisco, his name is Nash. Hence, you know, the same name as the city I currently live in, Nashville. Although also what's kind of interesting and is that, okay, so just checking some numbers here. All right, so there were 114 episodes of Miami Vice. So 114 episodes. And Nash Bridges had 122 episodes, which, in fact, yeah, Miami Vice lasted 5 seasons, Nash Bridges lasted 6. But on top of all that, you know, not only does Nash have a first name based on the city I currently live near, but the show takes place in the city near where I grew up, you know, in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, yeah, I have to give it to Nash just because home court. All right, Fred Sanford versus George Jefferson. By the way, when the Jeffersons started, the actor that played George Jefferson was only 37. Yeah, he's one of those people. You know, some people can like Ralph Macchio. You know, will never age for some reason, and then there are some people that just look way older than they are. And Patrick Stewart is a great example of that. As you look at Patrick Stewart in movies like Excalibur, he looks like an old man there, even though he's pretty young. And that's because he went bald when he was still a kid. So it just makes him look. That's why he looks pretty much the same age from when he was in his late 20s all the way through him probably reaching about 60. But then, you know, when he came out of retirement, if you will, for Picard, all of a sudden he looks like he's about 150. Dairy Queen, and no, I was referring to cocaine. Okay, I'm not sure what you were referring to. It's funny because the last thing you said was the gray or the white, talking about Gandalf, and you were referring to cocaine, not Gandalf, right? So No, I don't know what the reference was that I might have mistaken that you were talking about cocaine. Let's see. But Dairy Queen's where blizzards come from. That I got. Yeah, he beat the Balrog, but after days of fighting it in his weaker, limited form. Yes. So Gandalf is not to be underestimated. Thomas! Hey, I was making fun of you earlier. No way Balrog would make it across that bridge. Foot was wider than the bridge. Well, yeah, but the Balrog was just counting on them all being stupid. And based on what we see in the rest of the Lord of the Rings, Balrog had good reason to think they were all stupid. James T. Kirk versus Mr. Bean and Mr. Rogers. Well, that's interesting because, I already said that James T. Kirk was one of the very few people that could defeat Mr. Bean. And that's because James T. Kirk has gone up against extremely powerful and yet comedic villains in the past. However, when you throw Mr. Rogers in the mix, Mr. Rogers adds absolutely nothing because Mr. Rogers is just going to sit there and change his sweater while Kirk and Mr. Bean fight it out. So it still goes to James C. Kirk. Parakeet? Oh, talking about Tweety? Yeah, I think Tweety's supposed to be a parakeet, but I'm not 100% sure. I thought he was just a Tweety bird. Yeah, he calls himself a Tweety bird, but I'm almost certain. Let's take a look. Let's see if Google knows. What kind of bird was Tweety bird? Tweety bird is a small yellow male canary. He's a canary. Okay. Though often referred to as a Tweety bird, he is explicitly identified as a canary, characterized by his large head, blue eyes, and sometimes deceptive, innocent appearance. Species, yellow canary, often depicted as a baby bird in his early appearances. He's male, created by Fitz Furling and Bob Clampett. First appeared in the 1942 cartoon A Tale of Two Kitties. Known for his catchphrase, I taw a putty tat, and his antagonistic yet clever relationship with Sylvester. Originally, he was a naked pink baby bird, but quickly became a yellow feathered bird. Oh man, I want to see now I want to see A Tale of Two Kitties. That's the name of. So I want to see what he looked like back then. Don't know if I'll ever be able to find it, but let's see. Tale of Two Kitties. Wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. There's Tweety. All right. Let's see. Tab. So yeah, if we switch screens here. So there's Tweety right there. Right there. There's Tweety before he had feathers. So this is Tweety's first appearance, and notice he's carrying a gun. So yeah, don't mess with Tweety. All right, so there you go. And Thomas says Hulk Hogan died in 2025. Oh, that's sad. I didn't know he died last year. Hulk Hogan passed away last year. And, yeah, sorry, I did not know. R.I.P. to the Hulkster, says Bradley. Street Preacher says, and speaking about theology, was there a stream on Friday? Do we still have one chapter left? There was not a stream on Friday, so we still do have another chapter left in the Leviticus series, and I got to make a thumbnail for the upcoming. The numbers are Deuteronomy. I always forget whatever one's coming up next. As we continue through our Torah. And I apologize, guys. I know I've been wanting to do those streams Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I have not been consistent about it. And there's just been too many life events that have happened that keep getting in the way. But I'm still working towards that. So keep an eye out for me Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So hopefully this week I'll actually get to do it. Josiah says, Michael, tell me where do animals go when they die, and where do gangsters go die when they die? So assuming you go to when they die. A gangster. I'm not sure what you mean by a gangster, because if you're talking about someone who's a straight up evil person and non repentant sin and all that, probably going to hell. But as far as animals, there is no explicitly biblical answer to this because it does not actually say. So, do animals have a soul? Is really the question. And the honest answer is I don't know. I don't know if animals have an eternal component that you would call like a soul. And really, technically, humans don't. The only reason that humans can live forever is because of the tree of life. So I don't know if, for example, let's say you have a pet that you really loved and then you die. Will that pet be there with you for all eternity? Well, that would kind of suck if that were true, because that would mean every pet you've ever owned will live for all eternity. And so your house is just going to be infested with all the pets you've ever had. And so I would think the answer is probably when an animal dies, they're just gone, similar to what the atheists believe about humans. However, I'm certainly open to being wrong about that. But I don't believe that the Bible explicitly states anything about what happens to animals after they die. Could you imagine if Fran Drescher played Laxana Troy? Oh my God. Oh, if Fran Drescher played Laxana Troy, I would stop watching Star Trek. No, I don't know. That's a tough one, but I'm glad that never happened. And Stan says, yeah, tons of musicians have recently moved to Nashville. Yes, that is 100% true. White Stripes guy has a recording studio slash record pressing facility. A lot of people have come here and set up businesses like that, and even other businesses just to take advantage of the presence of all the musicians. Like Kid Rock now owns a honky tonk on Broadway in downtown Nashville, and I think it's like called Kid Rocks or something, or so But yeah. Who would win in a drinking contest between Mr. Worf versus Norm from Cheers? Well, Worf versus Norm. You would think, obviously, Worf is the easy pick. But Norm can literally go into a bar, drink his breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then go home perfectly fine. Think about that for a second. He drinks all day long and then goes home and he's perfectly fine. Meanwhile, Worf, I think, can and does get drunk. And Worf is, since they're not drinking prune juice, I assume they're going to be drinking something that Norm has had before to keep it fair, because it would not be fair if all you've ever drank your entire life is Kool-Aid, and then someone invites you to a bar that only serves hard liquor. They both die trying to win. That's also a possibility. What about the story about the man who wrestled an angel? I'm not sure which. What about what? What? I'm not sure what you're talking about specifically. I mean, there's Jacob wrestled with an angel, although, and that's why he was renamed Israel. Okay, man who wrestled an angel. Yeah, the only thing is that comes up in a Google search is Jacob. But yeah, I'm not sure what your point is about that. Though don't forget, the Archie Bunker served in the army during World War II, so any matchup he had any matchup he has combat experience. I did not know that, and I wondered, did what about Fred Sanford though? Let's see. All right, and let's see. Let's see. He frequently talked about being a major in World War II to impress others. But these stories were humorous exaggerations based on war movies. Uh, let's see. No, 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 let's see. Yeah, I don't see that it says much other than that. Um, the actor was in the United States Army. He went to Vietnam. So, so thank you for your service, the late Desmond Wilson. Oh, he also became a minister in 1984. I did not know that. So he was a minister in 1984. He served in the United States Army from 1966 to 1968, the year I was born. And he's in the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam, where he was wounded. I was wondering why he only served for 2 years there. Yeah. So yeah, that's actually kind of cool. But yeah, it doesn't say what Fred Sanford's military record was, except that he bragged about being a major in the army. But it sounds like that may have been completely untrue. So well, we don't really know. Yes, the Dairy Queen Blizzard. That's what I figured. Let's see. Does Jason Voorhees have a chance against Freddy Krueger? Well, in Freddy versus Jason, we saw them fight, 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 fight. And the problem is, so Jason Voorhees can easily outfight Freddy Krueger in the real world. But in Dreamland, no, nobody can beat Freddy in Dreamland. People just want to be texting. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's not me. All right. Michael Myers versus the Joker. For real? Come on now. There's no contest because the Joker has no superhuman powers. Michael Myers, however, is an unkillable killing machine. So, yeah. I don't think that there's really much there, much of a fight. Why didn't you ever watch Alf? Honestly, because the show just looks stupid to me. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm sure some of you loved it, and that's great. But when I look at the promos for Alf, and you see this puppet going, "Hey everybody, I'm an alien and I like to eat cats" or whatever, I'm like, yeah, no thanks. I just to me it looked dumb. Speedy Gonzalez versus Roadrunner in race. That's interesting. We've never seen the two of them. I don't think the two of them have ever actually run side by side. So the question is, how fast are they? And I don't know that there's a simple answer to that, but let's see. Uh, okay, so let's see. It's impossible to definitively say who is faster. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, there's nothing that I can. Let's see. Speedy Gonzalez is the fastest mouse in all Mexico. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that could definitively show. But so who would win in a straight up race between Speedy Gonzalez and the Roadrunner? So thinking about their cartoons, Roadrunner definitely, as far as what we've seen on screen, Roadrunner is incredibly fast and can traverse many hundreds of miles very quickly. Speedy Gonzalez also is lightning fast, and but I don't know that we've ever seen him run super long. Like I don't think that I could be wrong, but like I could see like is there a cartoon where Speedy Gonzalez says, "Oh, let me go back to Mexico and see my family," and then he goes and comes back like 2 seconds later. So they're all great. I don't know if there's anything like that. So I don't know about distance. How far can Gonzalez run? But assuming they have at least similar stamina, I'm just, man, I can't get past the fact that the Roadrunner has such longer legs. It's got to give him some kind of speed advantage there. And plus, Roadrunners are kind of designed for fast running, where mice are not. So I'm going to have to give it to Roadrunner, but I put a big old asterisk there because I'm certainly open to being wrong about that one. Did you like the new Megadeth album? Oh, talking to Robert, because yeah, I haven't heard it. And neither has Robert. Clayton from Tarzan versus Shaw from opening season. I don't know either of those characters. Though there is a scripture that is against animal abuse and the mistreatment of animals. That's true. And that's one of the reasons that the Jews believe a fundamental tenet of being a good person is to treat animals well, and to which I have nothing but respect. And I think that animals should be treated well. I don't think we should abuse animals. But there's nothing that says that animals have a soul. So, you know, I know that people try to argue this forever and ever, like the idea that will your pets be in heaven, you know, so that you can say that as an encouraging word to your kids if their pet dies. But the truth is, we don't really know. That all that being said, I think that it's entirely possible that animals that were domesticated and kept as pets might come back just for the people that want them. But I don't know. It's on Spotify. Let's see. I wonder if Blood Wine has a proof level. Yeah, you know, we don't really know how strong Klingon drinks are. It would be nice to know. Let's see. Okay, then. Okay, Spotify thing. Uh, and then you said all the songs are on YouTube. Let's see. Red Fox was second lieutenant in World War II. Yeah. So, but as far as Sanford is concerned, we don't know. I don't know why I said the other actor from the show, but yeah. Okay. Oh, I think that was the guy that played Junior. Okay, thanks, Daniel, for letting me know that. Okay, yes, thank you, Daniel, for telling us all about Megadeth. Uh, let's see. They had a race against the Flash in an ad. I did not see that. So what? Speedy Gonzalez and Roadrunner versus the Flash. I think Flash would definitely win that. But I'm sure if it's for a promotion or for kids, they always end those things with a tie, which is just silly to me. But hey, what do I know? Let's see. Track Reviewer says, who would win in a BS contest? Cliff Clavin versus Garrick. Ooh, wow. That is a tough one. Because Cliff Clavin, for those of you that don't know, is the connoisseur of BS from Cheers. He has said so many stories that are complete fabrications. But he's also said some things that were correct. And he always says it as like he is so confident that what he's saying is true that when he's disproven, he is just absolutely heartbroken. But and Garrick similarly is the king of BS on Deep Space Nine. Even around characters like Quark, Garrick is the BS artist of Deep Space Nine. So the question would be, who would be able to BS better? And boy, is that a tough one to decide, because they both have significant strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, I don't know. My gut would say Garrick, but I'm not really overly convinced of that because Cliff Clavin is one heck of a BS artist. The Horde from Split versus Michael Myers. The Horde, is that what they called him? The Horde? Is that the all right. It's an interesting name. But anyway, so the Horde versus Michael Myers. You see, the problem with putting pretty much anything against Michael Myers is that unless the thing you're talking about is completely immortal and completely indestructible, or some combination thereof, but immortality is an absolute must, or the ability to resurrect oneself, which Michael Myers does on a regular basis. When you kill Michael Myers and he said, "Oh, it must be Tuesday." It's not difficult for Michael Myers to overcome being killed. So as I think Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, those guys, they're in a class of specifically like sort of superhuman serial killer thing that it's I don't know that there's any way to really counter that for the Horde. Now the Horde is if it's the character I'm thinking of, the Horde is the guy that basically he's got multiple personalities and each one has different superpowers for him, so he can switch between these personalities to get almost every superpower, which is cool. But I think that it makes him man. I don't think that the Horde is immortal, and I don't think the Horde can recover from any injury. So I'm going to have to give it to Michael. All right, Trek Reviewer says, I remember the one episode Bugs Bunny played the Roadrunner on the Roadrunner versus Wile E. Coyote. Yeah, I remember that too. I can't remember why it was, like the Roadrunner called in sick or whatever, but Bugs Bunny had to play him. You should go. I was going to do a nerd fights on the last comment. What? Oh, Roadrunner versus. You should do a nerd fights on your last comment. You don't mean this comment, do you? The Roadrunner versus Wile E. Coyote, or do you mean the BS contest? Because since that one has Garrick in it. I do think that would be a good question on nerd fights. All right. Megadeth made a cover of Metallica's Black Ride the Lightning. Don't know that one. Meant nerd fights on Cliff versus Garrick. Yeah, that would be actually a fun thing to do. Sorry, I'm so zony. I'm really tired today. I don't know why. I slept a ton yesterday, and I feel like I could just go right back to bed right now. Though, as here in the town I live in, people that put out food for all the stray cats here, are they really being kind or doing more harm than good? Their complete necessary care still isn't being taken care of as much as proper medical care. And Treston's taking off. Have a good one, Treston. I'll see you on Wednesday, if not before. So, are you doing good by helping stray cats? That is actually an interesting question. Because if you don't feed them, then the stray cats have a much higher chance of dying. So I can see why you might feel like it's the good thing to do. But if you do, then you're encouraging a rampant problem of stray cats. So I would say this, based on what the Bible doesn't say, like the Bible doesn't say that if an animal starves to death, it's your fault or your responsibility or anything like that. Although man is given dominion over the earth, would be the only counterpoint I can think of. But it doesn't say that, well, therefore, you have to go out and feed all the animals, right? What do you do if there's a drought? Do you have to get water for them? I think that, but it does suggest that you should take care of people in need, right? So I think that the Bible differentiates between the two. And so I think that, are you doing good by feeding stray cats? I think the answer honestly is no. However, if there's a homeless person, you should still do everything in your power to help them out. Like I think about, man, the homeless people in this area are really suffering right now because we got hit by this massive cold front and they don't have a nice warm house to be in like I do. I'm so thankful that I'm inside a house with electricity and heat and running water. And don't get me wrong, I understand that a lot of homeless people are out there because they made poor decisions. Some of them are out there just because they like it. All that, I get all that. But at the same time, when the weather gets the way it is right now, those people could literally be dying in the streets, and most people don't care. So I think that's a real problem. Am I worried about stray cats? No. And I think that the Bible prioritizes people over animals as well. All right, so Josiah now says the horde from Split took a shotgun, recover from it. We might have recovered, but you see, the thing is that, yeah, that's nothing to Michael Myers. I mean, Michael Myers has been killed 100 times over, but nothing really keeps him down, right? So, heck, in the first movie, how many bullets did Michael take before falling off the railing? I don't know the answer, but I know it was a lot. I mean, Loomis unloaded into him. Yeah, man, I am really tired. I just realized I'm kind of zoning out, just sitting here thinking. And you guys are probably going, man, what is wrong with Salty? Yeah. Josiah said, "Wake up, Michael." Yeah, I wasn't quite asleep, but man, God, it was close. Jakar from B5 versus Commander Tomalak from TNG. Okay, so two more characters played by the same actor. But so Tomalak is a Romulan, Jakar is a Narn. I would dare say that Romulans would physically have the edge over a Narn. Keep in mind, Romulans are Vulcan offshoots, and Vulcans are about 3 or 4 times stronger than a human. While Narns, it says, are stronger than a regular human. I don't know what's the biggest strength feat we've ever seen Jakar or any other Narn actually do. And maybe you guys have something because I'm not a huge B5 fan, so I could be missing something. But I just think that Romulans have the physical edge. Tell me where I'm wrong. And yes, I know, Josiah, I don't know what it is. I've zoned out a couple of times right in the middle of a sentence on this stream. So I'm going to wrap it up here pretty soon and take a nap. Mr. Bean versus the Fonz. Could he overcome Fonz's coolness? That's an interesting question. Because Fonzie is, yeah, he operates on pure coolness. That's what his superpower is. And he can do things like, make the jukebox turn on and stuff like that. And yeah, his Robert points out his superpowers were able to overcome Mork's alien powers. And Mork is not one to be underestimated. His alien powers are very impressive, especially the time slowing down thing where he goes woof, and it makes everybody slow down. That's a superpower I would love to have. But the man, oh man, you guys give me some good ones today. But the Fonz. Because Mr. Bean, his ability is usually based on him accidentally putting himself into a situation where the other person's attack backfires on them. But here's the problem: is that Mr. Fonz's coolness makes it inherently impossible for anything he does to backfire on him. So, I think that Mr. Bean's powers would not overcome the Fawns. So if that happens, then it comes down to just pure hand-to-hand combat skills, in which, while the Fonz is not a particularly good fighter, he's also not a particularly bad fighter. And so I think Fonz wins that one. Is it sane to feed an ATM with stray cat if you're a psycho? Huh? What? Does that even... Is it sane to feed an ATM with a stray cat if you're a psycho? Well, obviously, if you're a psycho, or you're not sane by definition. But how would you feed a stray cat into an ATM? I don't quite follow you there. Could I assume that's you? Could you imagine if Fran Drescher and Gilbert Godfrey got together and had a kid with his voice and her laugh? Oh my God. Oh, that would definitely be a sign of the apocalypse right there. Oh. Fonzie was even able to overcome Mork's. Oh, you already read that. Yeah. Mork versus Marvin the Martian. I knew something with Mork was going to come up. You see, Marvin the Martian has very advanced technology and, the best voice in all of cartoons. I am so very angry. The Q1135 space modulator. But anyway, Mork, however, is a very powerful alien. Obviously he comes from the planet Orc, if I remember correctly, and he reports to Orson, his superior. But Mork, you know, Mork's time warping ability and I believe that his time warping ability is not a device. I think that that's something that he actually innately can do. It's something that Orkans, I guess, just have that power. And so that alone makes Mork pretty much unbeatable because when Mork goes into time warp mode, everything else slows down to almost stopped, right? And so then Mort can pretty much do anything he wants. He can move around basically like he's the Flash, or think about the scenes from X-Men with Quicksilver running around, moving people's arms around and stuff with while they're frozen because he's moving so fast. So I don't think Marvin, as cool as Marvin is, I don't think that he can overcome that ability. And so I'm going to have to give it to Mork, even though my personal favorite is Marvin. And I think I just like Marvin because I can kind of do his voice. I used to be able to do his voice perfectly, but that was a long time ago. And that's from American Psycho. Oh, the feed an ATM with stray cats. Well, I've never seen American Psycho, so there's that. I do know Christian Bale was the star of it. But it's a movie that never interested me. I think my wife read the book, but yeah, I was never interested. Voiced by the great Orson Welles. Yes, it's kind of funny. His boss was Orson, voiced by Orson. Norman Bates from Psycho versus Ducat from Deep Space Nine. Who would survive? Oh, Ducat. Norman Bates is a cool character and all, but and by the way, written by Robert Bloch, who also wrote 2 episodes of Star Trek: The Original Series. So there's a Star Trek connection there. But I think that going up against someone like Ducat, and it's not just like because you're saying who would survive because they're both murderers, but Ducat, he is the equivalent of a military general and a very smart one at that. Yes, he loses at the end to Cisco, but Cisco is also part wormhole god, so you know he has a distinct advantage. But Ducat going up against Norman Bates. Norman Bates, he is not particularly combat effective. I mean, think about it. All his victims were basically women who he snuck up on and stabbed them, right? Even Ducat would kind of look down on him. So, but Ducat, on the other hand, who knows how many people he's personally killed, and he's responsible for the death of thousands of Bajorans. So yeah, I don't think I don't think that Norman Bates has much of a chance. You guys need to let Michael sleep. It's all right. I'm yeah. I don't know why I'm so tired today, but I really am. I was planning on getting work done today, and I'm just feeling like when I get off of here, I'm just gonna go to sleep for a few hours, and then I'll get up, eat dinner, and then go back to sleep. That's basically Mork or Monk has ultra instinct. Yeah, well, Monk is kind of like Sherlock Holmes in that he walks into a room and he sees every little detail, and so he can very quickly solve crimes because he sees every little detail, much like Sherlock Holmes does, where he'll say, the perpetrator was left-handed. You happen to be left-handed, and so you are the perpetrator, right? So it's And finally, Daniel says, salty versus sleep. Well, as you can see on today's live stream, while sleep does get its occasional punch in, I have ultimately prevailed over the horrible sleep. Although I've been going now for 3 hours and 23 minutes, so yeah. Trek Review says, had a good day. Josiah says, bye. So you guys are just determined to kick me out the door now. Wow. I feel like you don't even like me anymore. It's kind of mean, guys. You hurt my feelings. I mean, really. Nobody's going to apologize? Nobody? Boy, that just hurt. All right, just messing around. All right, guys. So yeah, I will wrap it up. I'll take a nap and then hopefully get some actual work done. So hopefully I will see you. Yeah. So now you're throwing critical drinker lines at me. Go away now. And yeah, so critical drinker. I really didn't want to be thinking about him today.